chat, and we will, yeah, that's where we'll all be able to catch up with each other. So I believe we are live. Just check. I think there's a little bit of a delay from what I have on my screen and what shows up in YouTube. So looks like it is popping up. So if that's the case, awesome. And again, welcome everybody. Today's going to be kind of a fun one. I've been getting a lot of questions lately about using randomness in music. And I use it a lot. As you know, if you've watched any of my videos or performances or anything like that, you know that I like to use randomness, but not like total randomness. I like to have a little bit of control over stuff. So we're going to talk about that today, using different things for controlled randomness, whether it's things in the modular, things within the hardware boxes, things within the Oxy-1 sequencer, a whole bunch of different ways that we can get controlled randomness working for us in our music production, for whether it's for improvising live, whether it's for generating ideas for production, or whether it's just for hanging out, jamming on your stuff and making music that you like to listen to. So like all those things are, I think, very interesting and valid ways to use this and to have a good time with music. And I guess that's what it's all about, right? Is having fun with music. So, let's see, before we get started, just a couple things. If you haven't already seen, a couple days ago, I launched an online program for learning how to perform live with hardware. We've got first cohort is starting the 11th of July, and taking signups right now. It's about half full after just a couple days. So I'm very excited about that. So thank you guys very much for the response. And if you're interested in that, please go to circolive.com/courses, and you'll be able to find all the information there. Or if you have any questions and you want to ask them in the chat here, feel free to do that, and be happy to answer. I know that I've gotten some good questions, and it's given me some good feedback about how to better explain things with the course, because I want to make sure it's really clear for everybody before you jump in. So yeah, love to have you guys do that if you're interested. And if you have questions to ask before you do, please jump in and ask those as you like. Yeah, so let's see. Again, jump into the chat. If you have questions, if you want to just say hi to everybody, let us know you're there and let us know where you're watching from. I'm always curious. These videos kind of go around the world, so it's fun to see and hear where everybody's coming from. That's been something really cool with the signups for the course too, is we've got people from Germany, from the Netherlands, from the United States, from Canada, from, let's see, France, from South America. So people from all over, which makes it super interesting. And it's a great way to kind of grow a network of people and get to know people all over the world. So yeah. Hey, Wabbit just jumped in. Hello from Virginia. Excited to see you in the course coming up in a week. You are in Jerusalem. Wow. I think that's a first. Awesome. Well, welcome. Happy to have you here. Yeah, jump in and let us know where you're from. That's cool. It's awesome to have people from everywhere. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about what the subject for today is. So the idea of using randomness. So as many of you know, if you've seen my stuff before, you know that I tend to do techno or house music, predominantly techno, but I do a bit of everything. But this is also relevant for anything, for if you're doing, ambient music, if you're doing, soundscapes, or if you're doing, scoring for things. You can also use controlled randomness. Any kind of beat making or any of that stuff, controlled randomness can be really interesting in your workflow. So let's just jump right in really quick and change up views here. I've got all kinds of views to play with, so let's go to this one. Yeah, so here's what we're working with right now for today. So we've got the modular setup and a couple of Elektron boxes over here on the side. And if you look over my shoulder here, we also have synth drum machine, another drum machine over here, and then the push, which is controlling Ableton. And all of this stuff is multi-tracked into Ableton, so that's acting kind of like as my master mixer. And so I can use the mixer here on the push to bring things in and out, and I can also use it to record things if there's something interesting that I want to record. But it's all kind of, that's my, excuse me. That's my studio setup. So it's really set up so that I can write this way, but I use this kind of improvisational style as well as this controlled randomness style in writing as well as performing. I kind of use them, they really go hand in hand. And the idea being that when you're improvising, performing live, you're kind of jamming live. Whereas when you are writing something, those jams become your idea generation. And so I have things set up here so that it's really quick to generate ideas and to record them and kind of note them down so that you've got things that you can come back to. I tend to, when I am doing production or writing sessions, I tend to split those sessions up where I don't really sit down and say, okay, now I'm going to write a track. Sometimes it happens that way and I just kind of go with the flow and whatever. But I don't usually sit down and say, okay, now I'm going to write a track and like get started A to Z. What I'll generally do is I'll have sessions where if I'm feeling creative or if I'm feeling kind of like playing around, having some fun with the gear, I will come down to my studio and I will just record a bunch of stuff. So I'll start generating some ideas and quickly, generate an idea, get it recorded, move on, generate another idea, get it recorded, move on. And so that way I can kind of come back to those ideas when I want to do a real kind of songwriting session. And it's like I have my own little sample pack of things that I've made, that I've created with either the modular or the synths or the groove boxes, drum machines, whatever. And then I can use those things for actually building out, fleshing them out into songs. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, is kind of show a little bit about that process of generating those ideas. And again, like I said, it applies either to performance or to production or songwriting. So I think it's kind of useful no matter how you're using it. So let's see here. I might actually change views here because this one, too many overdubs here. Okay, with this one you can see a little bit better the Oxy and a little bit better the Elektron boxes, which is because those are the sequencers I'm generally using. I do sometimes use the Metron sequencer that's here in my modular case, but I generally use that for drums because it's very quick to kind of put in drums and ideas. When I want to do controlled randomness, I will use one of a few different options. So I've got the Oxy one, which I use predominantly, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The Elektron sequencers have some ability to do controlled randomness, but it's a little bit more programmed controlled randomness, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then there's other options, like you can use random generation from the modular, where you've got random LFOs generating, and those can be sent to something. I've got a Turing machine here which will generate random patterns that you can then stop and loop that pattern if you like it. So there's a lot of different ways to generate randomness and use that in your production. But what we're going to really focus on today is the Oxy and the Elektrons, because those are kind of like the main ways that I'm working with this, and that way they can be something that if you're using either one of these pieces of gear, any of the Elektron boxes will act the way that we're going to talk about today. And if you're using an Oxy one, you can use that really with anything. So you don't have to have a modular that has, LFOs that are independent and Turing machines and things like that. If you have it, great, that works too. And that's a whole other fun way to do this. But the idea is that with certain pieces of gear, you can use it with whatever you want. So basically, just to get started with the Oxy one, if you haven't used it before, you've got 4 different sequencers, and They can each be different types of sequencers. So if we just choose sequencer number 1, it's blank right now. And if we kind of go in and get that one set up, we can choose which kind of sequencer we want. So it can be a monophonic, a monosequencer, a polysequencer, a chord, a multitrack, a stochastic, or a matricial sequencer. I tend to use one of two more than any others. I'll use the mono or I'll use the multi-track. And that is more a personal preference thing. Like, one of the things that's cool about the Oxy is it gives you a lot of choices of how you use stuff. So there's plenty of things that I don't use in it because it doesn't necessarily go along with my workflow, that are things that other people, that's all they use. And so you can kind of pick and choose. It's kind of like the Octatrack, where it can be a lot of different things, and then you just ultimately pick and choose what you want to use it for. So basically, if you set it up as a mono sequencer, that means that this right now, this whole group of, this whole grid of buttons is your sequencer. You have 16 steps all the way across, which can be extended out to 64 steps. I think you can actually go to 128, although I never use that. I generally try to stick to 16 steps, and then I use different things to make it seem longer than it is. And we'll talk about that a bit more when we go over to the Elektron stuff. But what you have right here is you have 16 steps, and then the 8 pads going vertically are the notes in whatever scale you're in. So you can decide what scale you want. So right now we have this in Phrygian E, so that the root note is E4. And if you go along here, so you've got, this is E, this bottom note is E, and this will be the 8 notes in that scale going down. So it's very visual if you want to generate stuff this way. So I guess the easiest way to do something randomly with this is to just randomly push notes. So if you just go like this, okay, cool. Now we have a random pattern that we just generated with our fingers, and maybe we want something else here. The way this is set up is that the higher up it is on the scale, or on the grid, the higher the note is. So it's an octave from one to the other. And so you can see visually what the notes are going to be. It will be a low note, middle, high note, so you can kind of get a picture of what that's going to be before you do it. And why I say controlled randomness when we're talking about this stuff is that it is random because we just randomly push buttons. But the control part comes from the fact that you can set this to a key. So that means that every note on this grid, no matter which one you press, will all go together in one form or another. So it will always be in the key that you set. So if you set, major, minor, Phrygian, Locrian, whatever scale you decide to choose, and whichever root note you decide to choose based on your personal preferences, this will always work out. And so it can be a shortcut to trying to find things that work when you're working in a chromatic scale, because you may be like, okay, I want to play this, okay, but that doesn't work, okay, but you might miss a note, you might play it wrong. Or if you're not a keyboard player, if you don't know a ton about music theory, and so you're not comfortable with scales and things like that, you may not even know what goes together. So then you spend a lot of time just playing around and trying to find things that sound good. And that can be fun, don't get me wrong. I mean, like, there's a lot to be said with exploration like that and just messing around with stuff. But this can also help you kind of shortcut a bit and save a lot of time, because whatever you generate randomly is going to go together. And it may not all sound good. That's definitely for sure. It doesn't necessarily all sound good, but let's see. So if we go ahead and hit play here, so we can get things started going, and then I can bring up the voice that I have this going to right now. Let me know how you're hearing things from there too. Just want to make sure. It sounds a tad quiet on my side, so. Right, so now we have an idea. We've got something that we've generated that is in a certain key. If we generate other things with other voices and we stick with that key, they'll go together. And so we have a whole bunch of different options of things that we can do with this. If you want to change the key, you can change the key, generate new random stuff, and then you've got something else going on, right? You can also change the root note of this. You can move it down. So you've still got the same scale, you've still got the same notes, but now you're down in more of a bass, area if you wanted to do a bass. Or you can bring this back up, right? And again, we can clear this out and just randomly hit notes again. And again, these are still all in that same key. So that's kind of the easiest way at first, is just press some notes, have a good time, but use that scale mode in order to make sure that those notes are all kind of sounding the way they should, or the way you want to. But it's probably the simplest way, because you don't have to have any special equipment. You can do this on any sequencer that will allow you to lock to key, or any synth that will allow you to lock to key. So maybe you can send in a sequencer or in a sequence, but the synth will allow you to lock to key. Or some groove boxes will do this as well. So it's something that you can do without having to have any kind of random generation capability. I use this sometimes with the Elektron boxes because they can't generate random notes in key, but they have great sound sources. So maybe I've got this sending into there, and I can use the sounds that are in there and maybe randomize, which we'll talk about in a minute, to create a sound. Whereas with this, I'm actually randomizing the pitch, the notes in key to create a melody or create a bass line or whatever I want to do. So that's the first one. The second way to do that with the Oxy and a few other sequencers, I think the Hapex does this as well, and there are a few modular sequencers that work this way as well. And I know that there's also a few, if you're working in a DAW, if you're working in software. I know in Ableton, there's a couple of Max for Live sequencers that will do what I'm about to show you as well. I like it with the Oxy because it's a hardware sequencer, and I prefer to use hardware just because I like, the tactile part of touching the buttons, but also that I can generate something and send it to the modular, or I can send it to a groove box, or I can send it to a drum machine, or I can send it to a synth, and I can move things around, and I don't have to have a sequencer in a thing and only use that thing with that sequencer. So it gives me a ton of flexibility to kind of move things around that way. So it's one thing that I really love about the Oxy, as well as the Hapex, the Circlon. There's a bunch of other sequencers out there that can all do some really cool stuff. The Torso T1. I just chose the Oxy because it works best for me, and I think it kind of does what all of those others do combined, where I think each one of those may do a specific thing really well, but doesn't necessarily have all the flexibility. This kind of gives you all those in one box. So, so yeah, it's pretty cool. So anyway, something that you can do within the Oxy that's very cool is it has a random note generation section. So there's a button here that has a little dice on it. So it's like roll the dice and come up with something random. And you can choose in here the range that you want it to go. So it's plus or minus 7%, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you can go all the way up to 24% plus or minus from whatever your root note is. So we were in Phrygian E, and our root was E, I think 2 or 3 right now. So it will go plus or minus that percentage from that. Or you can have it go just plus from that if you want to just keep the root note and have it always go only up a certain amount. Then you can decide what percentage of randomness you want it to have. So each note, does it hold the note? Does it play the same note 3 times in a row and then move? Because that's less random than always moving off of wherever the note is would be kind of 100% random. So you've got the ability to kind of dial that in wherever you want, like what type of randomness you've got. And then the final setting that's on here is called density. And that means out of because we're just using 16 steps right now, out of your 16 steps, or however long you want the pattern length to be, how many of those steps do you want to have a note on them? So if you were to go all the way down to, let's say, 3% and then generate something random, it's really going to give you one note because that's, 3% of 16. If you go all the way up to 100% and you hit this, you're going to have something on every single note all the way across. And then you've got all of the things in between. So it depends on how diverse of a range of notes melodically you want this, melody or bass line or whatever, however long you want that to happen. So you have that control. You have the control of randomness, how much you want it to repeat certain notes before it changes versus just going random all over the place, and how dense you would like your pattern to be. Every once in a while, a couple notes, or do you want it to be notes on every single pattern? And then once you've decided on those things, so let's just dial some stuff in here. Let's say plus or minus 7%. Let's do, 25% randomness. And let's do density of like 60%, okay? Just to see what that looks like. Now again, we're still in that same key. So every note that this generates is gonna be within that key. So then you just press the button here and we've randomly generated something. Anytime you have a red one that's down on the bottom, it means it's an octave down from that note. And if you get one at the top that's white, it means it's an octave up from that note. So this shows you that we've got some things. Then you've got the colors here, which are showing the differences in velocity. And so like you can have notes that are tied together like these, so it'll be a longer note rather than a shorter note. Now we've got something here and we can go ahead again and just hit play and hear what it sounds like. And then if we don't like this one, if you want to do something else different, then you can just hit it again. And the reason why you're only hearing one note and nothing here is because these are tied together. And the synth that I have this going through right now, I have the envelope pretty short. If I was to make that envelope longer, and you can also change gate length. You can change however, what you want this to actually be, sending that out. And if we like this, great. If we don't, we can just hit another one. And then let's say we liked the one previous more than this one. There's a back button, so it's kind of undo and redo. So we can go back to the last one and say, you know what, I changed my mind, I like the other one. If you hit shift, it goes back forward again. So you can bounce back and forth between patterns once you've created them. And again, and if let's say we wanted this to be much more dense, let's bring this all the way back up to like a 16th note pattern. And bring up the randomness. So again, it's kind of like, it's kind of endless random stuff generating. And you have a lot of control over, undoing and redoing. So it encourages you to play around. It encourages you to try something new because you're not afraid you're going to lose what you just had. And if you want, you can always go into the song mode afterwards and just save that pattern and say, okay, I want to, we're in sequencer 1 here, so just say, I like that one. So you just hold save and put it there. So now that's right there. So if I wanted to go back to that pattern at some other time, I can always go back to it. So again, it kind of encourages you to play around. And this is why when I'm writing or when I'm producing tracks or like writing things, creating patterns for performing live later or whatever, I'll tend to keep these sessions separate because I want to generate as many ideas as I can and just kind of get them out. And you see how quickly the ideas can come. So I'll get these ideas out. Sometimes I'll record them. Sometimes I'll save them just so that I can bring them back later. And then when it comes time to sit down and say, okay, I'm gonna actually use this to write a track, then I can pick through those and say, okay, I like these 2 or 3. I think they go pretty well together. They're all gonna be in the same key because of the way I generated them in the first place. And then I'll start to build out a track around those things. And the reason for that is, what I've found is, if I find a pattern that I like and I stop the initial kind of playful creative process part of it, then I might go down a path that takes me, hours and hours of saying, okay, let's build out around this. Let's put in a drum part, let's put in a kick, let's do a bass line, let's do, a pad, let's add a vocal, whatever you want to add to it. And then you get to it later and you're like, you know what? It's just not, it isn't what I thought it was. It isn't as good as I thought. And that's where we say, okay, well, you know what? Let's just scrap that one and start again. And how many of you watching this have endless projects that you've started that never went anywhere? They just got to be a loop or a few loops, and you kind of built them out a little bit and then you gave up on them. A lot of that comes from the fact that they may not be as good as you thought they were at the beginning. And so all of a sudden, when you start to build it out, you kind of lose your inspiration because you're like, yeah, that's not really the thing that I thought it was. So I'm just going to bag it. So let's go back to the drawing board and start over again. Well, if you've gone through this whole playful part, it's a lot of fun because then you've generated a lot of these sounds and then you can kind of pick from them after the fact, pick out the best of the best. Who knows? Maybe, you stopped what you were doing and built that out into a track that didn't end up going anywhere. And maybe the amazing inspirational idea that would have been the best track you've ever written, maybe it's the next thing you would have generated, but you didn't do it because you stopped and went down this road. So I like to keep these kind of creative sessions and then the more nitty-gritty sessions so that the nuts and bolts mechanics of production don't kind of suck me in and get me off of the creativity side. Now, don't get me wrong, production is very creative as well. And for those of you who do it as well, you'll understand what I'm saying. Like, it's really fun to build out the track and build out all those things. But there's a lot of it can be mechanical. A lot of it is, building in automations and setting levels and adding, effects and changing out your signal processing by your track and mixing things and, getting things to work together in your mix and changing up your sound design. So there's a lot of things that take time that can pull you into the technical aspect of it. If you haven't, and pull you away from the kind of playful, creative part of it. So, yeah, so that's a couple different ways that you can generate stuff randomly on here. There's another thing that's really interesting that I like to use a lot personally in the Oxy, and that is you can generate patterns, first of all. So let's just do one in one note as we've got going here. So we've got... So let's say we've generated this random pattern, we just plugged something in that we like randomly, but we want to try it out with some different notes, but we want to keep the rhythmical part of it the same. We don't want to change what step the notes are on, we just want to change the pitch of the note. So if we go back into that random generation part, the one that we had for density, which decides how many notes are in this, we can pull that all the way down. Pull that all the way down past 0, and what you get to after that is you get some other controls, humanize, order, pitch, and invert. So I use pitch a lot, and what that does is I can still have my range and my randomness, and if I hit to generate randomly at that point, I'm not going to change my rhythm at all. It's still going to be on these notes. It's just going to change which pitch they put. And being able to generate pitch and gate separate from each other randomly is a really powerful tool. So let's try that and see what it does. So you see the notes all stayed the same. So we were to go back, we didn't change up that rhythm at all. We just added notes to it. And again, if we hit randomize again, it'll keep randomizing the notes that are in those pitches, but without changing the notes that are on those gates or those, the position in the rhythm, but without changing up the gates at all. And again, this is a place that we can get ideas started. And let's say we find something that we kind of like, but we're like, you know what, I'd like some more notes in here. Well, I can just add them. And let's say I don't want this note here. So again, you can use the random generator to generate ideas and get you started and get you moving. But you don't have to just use that. You're not stuck with that. So for example, if you're using a Euclidean sequencer, like what we have in the Elektron boxes and like what you have in like the torso and things like that, when you're using a Euclidean sequencer, you're tied to the number of pulses and the way they're divided up. So you can't really change that up and add something or take something away. Yes, you can, but you destroy the Euclidean sequence at that point, and it's no longer a Euclidean sequence that you can then add pulses or take them away. So you have a choice of either sticking with that Euclidean format or doing it where you have the control over adding and subtracting things and then bouncing back into it. With this, I have kind of the best of both worlds because as you saw, I can keep going with this. I can add this and I can take notes, and let's say I want notes, right? And I wanted this to be my pattern. Well, now I can go back to my random pitch generator. And now it's going to generate the pitch by itself, but still keep that new pattern that I've generated. Let's say I put something on every single step. Right? Now I can go back to the random pitch generator. Right? Or if I want to clear this out and just put a few notes and then hit the random pitch generator. So again, it gives a ton of options and a ton of flexibility to be able to use this kind of controlled randomness. So it's random in the sense that you're not generating those notes and things, or if you're using the density, even the gates, you're not doing those to something that's an idea that you had in your head. I want 3, then a space, then 4 more, then a space. I want it to go high, I want it to go low, whatever. You're not doing that when you're doing it using this method. So it is randomly generating things, whether it's generating pitch and gate together, if you use the full density thing, or it can generate just pitch. So that gives you a ton of control. You also have the ability in here to use, let's see here. It's not in the sequencer, but when you're using the multi-mode sequencer, you can use, you can generate a pattern with the Euclidean sequencer and then just randomly generate notes that are hitting that Euclidean pattern. So again, a lot of different ways to use a bit of control with a bit of randomness to come up with something cool and new and interesting and all that kind of stuff. So it's a ton of fun, and that's one of the reasons why I use it so much. Also because the connectivity with this going out to via CV and gate to the modular or going out via MIDI to other things is great. It also has USB-C MIDI, so I can connect it to Ableton. So I can use this same kind of random generation and sequencing to generate patterns in my DAW, and that goes for any DAW. So if you're using, like I know Wabbit, for example, likes to use an iPad. Well, yeah, use this to generate random ideas with soft synths on your iPad, or in Ableton, or Logic, or Pro Tools, or Cubase, or FL Studio, or whichever DAW you want to use. This can control that as well. So it gives you a very hands-on, very kind of hardware-based and tactile way to generate random stuff in pretty much any source you want. And you can switch it back and forth, which is really cool. So right now, I'm sending this to the modular via CV. But if I wanted to, I can switch this to this same pattern that we just created to a MIDI channel and send it to one of the synths if I want to. Another way that I use this a lot is when I travel for work, it has Bluetooth MIDI as well. So you can put a saw synth on your phone or on your iPad or whatever, and via Bluetooth MIDI, just with the AirPods in your phone, you can generate patterns like this. And if you come up with stuff that you really like and save them, then when you get home and you get back to any other kind of larger pieces of hardware that you have, you can just change the destinations and reroute them. So it's not routing to your phone anymore. Maybe it's routing to your Groovebox or your modular or your hardware synth or whatever. So it gives you a lot of opportunities to get that stuff all out there. Okay. So let's jump into the questions here. It looks like the chat has a bunch of stuff going on. By the way, if you joined us late, jump into the chat, ask any questions you have. If you want a different explanation of something or a demonstration of something, please put that in there. And if it's something I know how to do, I'll show you how to do it. And if I don't, I'll point you to somebody who does, because there's people who know this gear way better than I do as well. So let's see. Oh, hi from Germany. Hey, Chris. Hey, Ed. Ed from Texas. I think he's in Houston. Oh, music's a little loud. I can turn that down a bit here. Hey, Vincent, good to see you again. Awesome. Love to see you on those things. Friends from Blast from the Past. Let's see here. Oh, Jason, good to see you too. Another one of the people who's going to be joining us in the online course starting up pretty soon, which I'm pretty excited for. Vincent, use it with your Moog. I didn't know you were a synth dude. That's awesome. Glad to have you here. Hey, Tape Pusher. Good to have you here as well. Is the Oxy connected individually to all of your synths? Like, is there a MIDI out per instrument? So, very good question. So there's a couple different ways that the Oxy can be connected to things. So I'm actually gonna pull down my other Oxy so I don't have to change this up when I show you guys this. If you look on the back of the Oxy, you've got 8 CV and 8 gate outputs. So those can go directly using a patch cable directly into a modular if you want to. Then you have this connector right here, which is for the Oxy pipe, which is this little module right here on the side. If you see it as a HDMI cable, that HDMI is coming from the output on the back of this Oxy, and that takes all of those 8 CV and 8 gate channels into the pipe, and then you can patch from there. So you really only have to connect or disconnect one thing, and you can leave everything else patched, and you don't have to have wires all coming up and over and into your case. I use this all the time in my live rig because that way I can leave my whole modular patched when I travel, and when I show up at a gig, I just set down the Oxy, connect the pipe, and everything is already patched to where it needs to be. Then you have a clock and CV in. You have a clock and CV out, so you can send a CV clock out to things that accept that kind of clock. Then you have MIDI in and MIDI out over here, and then you have USB over here on the side, USB-C, which can also do note and MIDI and CC information. So now that said, when you send out from the MIDI on the Oxy, one of the things that's really super unique with the Oxy compared with a lot of other devices, most devices, like let's take for example one of the Elektron boxes. If I use the MIDI out from that, I have 16 channels of MIDI. That's kind of the standard thing with one MIDI cable going out, and 99% of the machines out there that can send out MIDI or accept MIDI can send out 16 tracks of MIDI. So I've got 16 tracks on here. I can send out 16, so I can control different things, whether they are 16 different synths or different parameters in different synths, or, you know, if something has multiple voices, I can send, you know, 4 tracks to something that's 4 voice multi-timbral, and I can control those. What's unique with the Oxy is there is a device, where do I have it? It's over here, that you can get as kind of an add-on. It's called the Oxy Split. And what this is you take the USB from the Oxy via TRS MIDI, and it goes into the in. Then you have out 1, out 2, and out 3. And then there's a through as well, if you wanted to go through the Oxy, just like you can with other MIDI. What these do is this can send out 16 tracks of MIDI each to 3 different destinations. So you have 1 through 16A, 1 through 16B, and 1 through 16C. So you actually have 48 individual channels of MIDI that you can send out from the Oxy, as well as 8 CVs and 8 gates, all at the same time. So if you're sending out to, let's say, and you would say, why do I need 48 channels of MIDI? I don't have 48 synths. Okay, well, you can have one controlling your pitch. One can be doing program change. One can change a CC parameter. One can be an LFO path. One can be, another type of modulation, like a mod wheel or something like that. So all of those can be sent out to multiple different devices. And so again, gives it a ton of power, being able to send out 48 channels of MIDI plus 8 CV and 8 gate. So, I mean, there's a crazy amount of connectivity that you have with this as well. So, so to answer your question, Tape Pusher, that's how you can send it out. So it's with the split. And this is like, it's an unpowered cheap little device that you can get as an add-on if you need all those extra channels. I think they're like $50, maybe a little less. And I saw at Super Booth, he's actually building a modular version of it, which is really cool. Hopefully that ends up becoming an actual thing that he sells, because I would love that, to not have to carry the extra little thing. But yeah, so you can send out all of that MIDI to all of those different destinations, and all you need is just the split. So then you can send it out, and you can see it's also got, it has TRS. So if you wanted to go out that way, for example, I use 8 tracks of MIDI to control the Oxy Choral in my live setup, because it's got 8 voices and you can control it via MIDI. So I'll send out a TRS MIDI cable to that, and then I'll control other things like the Digitac with a regular DIN MIDI cable. So yeah, again, it just gives you a ton of flexibility. Something that's a lot of makes it a lot of fun, because you can change your mind. You're not stuck to like one way of doing things, which I love as well. So yeah, so let's see here. Yes, so if you daisy chain them, which you could also do, you would have to turn off and on the receive notes of the instruments. However, another thing that's pretty cool is that because you have so many options for what's going out from here, you can send the same signal to multiple destinations. So you could in effect layer synths, but just by using this method, which is also really very, very cool. Except for the randomness, reminds me a lot of the Deluge sequencer. Kind of. The physical layout, I had a Deluge for a long time, and the physical layout for this is very similar. The buttons are the same size, and it gets compared a lot to the Deluge just because physically they used the same buttons, especially if you look at, this is the original version of the Oxy one. So if you look at this, it looks a lot more like the Deluge, but it's really an extremely different device than the Deluge. But other than the physical similarities of the buttons and the fact that in this one particular sequencer mode, you've got steps and pitch vertical and steps horizontal. Other than that, I mean, that's kind of where the similarities end. The Deluge obviously is a sound source as well. So you've got synths, you've got samples, you've got all kinds of things that you can do in the Deluge, you've got effects, whatever. This is just a sequencer. However, the sequencer part of it is exponentially more powerful than just the sequencer part of the Deluge. So it doesn't do any of the sound stuff, but it does way more in the sequencer stuff. So it's very much kind of a specialist It is a sequencer, and that's kind of it. But it can sequence a lot of different things. Another thing that's really different between this and the Deluge is because the Deluge started off without a functional screen. I mean, it had a screen, but you could never really use it for anything. Different now that there is a screen on it, I will give you that. There was a lot of button combinations to get things to do, and every one of the buttons on the face of it had combos that were written like really tiny next to it. And if you didn't know where those were, you had to always be able to see them. Very difficult for me personally to use in a dark kind of nightclub environment to play live. Whereas this, all of the controls are over here. These aren't the controls other than inputting data. So like if you were in the the LFO mode, you can write an LFO and draw it in here using the screen, kind of like you can with the Deluge as well. But other than that, all of the input is from these and the knobs and the screen. And there's a really cool interface between those. So like, there's 4 parameters across the bottom of the screen. Those line up with these 4 knobs, and they're press encoders as well, so you can move things and select. And then you've got each one of the buttons here, and then there's a shift function with each one of the buttons as well. So you get all of that functionality here without having to do the button combinations and kind of memorizing what's on there, or do the overlay that the Deluge has as well. But yeah, physically there is some similarity, but that's kind of where it ends. Which is a great opportunity to talk about the different kinds of sequencers in here. Is that, so for example, if we're on, each one of these 4 is not 4 tracks like you would think. Like right now, if they were all mono sequencers, like what this one is set up as, it would be 4 tracks, because it's just a mono sequencer using gate across the bottom and pitch vertically. However, if you were to go in and change the setup and change the type of sequencer to a, like for example, this is a multi-track sequencer. When you're in the multi-track mode, sequencer 1, which we're still on right now, has now 8 separate sequencers going all the way up. So if I put things like this, I'm not doing them on one instrument. Each one of these lines is a different destination. It's a different sequencer that can be sent to a different device, right? So that makes it, you can set up any one of the 4 sequencers can be set up using any one of the 4 types of sequencers. So with this multi-mode, this is actually 8 sequencers with 8 different destinations. So if I was to do a pattern across here, and I was to set this up to go out to, again, once you have this done, you have it set up to go out that way. But you can set this up to go out to another destination. Now you've got your pattern, but you don't see the vertical note. If you touch the individual note, you see the note here, and you can dial them in. So this becomes very much like the sequencer on an Elektron, or like the sequencer on a like a Roland TR-8S, or on let's see. What's the MC707 or something like that, where you've got your steps and then you hold them down to change the note. But I can send this to a synth, I can send this to a drum, I can send this to something, I can do my kick drum like this. So you can, each one of these can go out to a different destination. A lot of people use this mode for drums, so they'll set it up kind of like you would with a drum rack in Ableton, or like you would with the piano roll view in some DAWs, where each line is a different instrument. So you've got your kick, then you've got your snare, you've got your clap, you've got your hi-hats, you've got your ride, you've got your toms, you've got whatever, and you set each one of those to go out to a different destination. And now again, you can set this to go out via MIDI or via CV. So for example, this one right here on the bottom, I can send this out on 1A, which I'm pretty sure is set up to go to here. Just check this out. Let's see. Oh, that's why, because I don't have the pipe set up. But anyway, you can set this up to go out via MIDI. I didn't set that up because I wasn't actually planning on doing this, but this way I can show you guys. So again, this can go out. You can have each one of the 4 sequencers be a multi-track sequencer. So you can then send out to 32 different destinations from this. So it's in effect a 32 track sequencer instead of a 4-track sequencer. So I get asked a lot why I use this instead of, say, a Torso T1 or something like that. It's because this has a lot more options. So I can send this out to 32, I can have 32 different sequences in this going at the same time, going out to potentially 48 different destinations via MIDI plus 8CV and 8 gate. So you have kind of endless possibilities with it. The ability to get this out to other stuff is kind of crazy. So if we were to go back now to, so I can just show you a couple of others really quick. So you've got a polyphonic sequencer, a chord sequencer. So if you're in the chord mode, you've got the ability to sequence in chords here and then individually dial in what those chords are. The multi-track, which we just talked about. You've got the stochastic sequencer, which that's for a whole other video, because stochastic sequencers on their own are a whole other world. Then you have the matricial sequencer, which is pretty interesting. This one is 4 different sequencers, where the multi-track is 8, a mono is 1. This is 4 different sequencers. So each one of these 4x4 grids is a sequencer of things. So I can send this out to a destination. So you see that they're scrolling through their individual things. If I wanted to change the, let's see here. I can change the length. I don't use this one very often, but yeah, so with these, each one of these is kind of the menu. So whichever you're pressing here is what you're doing with the sequencer above it. So you have things here like this is your triggers that you just entered in where you want them to be. This is the notes. So right now, all of these triggers would be all on the same note. But if I was to go in to the note section and then change up some of these notes, I have the actual pitch of the note, the probability, randomness, all of that stuff. Then you have the intervals, so you can actually jump intervals between steps rather than sequencing in a particular note. So you can do a whole bunch of random generation that way, or generative music in general, so that it's constantly changing. It's doing different intervals of pitch rather than selecting the actual pitch itself. Pulses is kind of like the way you would do with a Euclidean sequencer. This is velocity by note. Then you have the octave, so you can do octave jumps. So if you were sequencing, say, a 303 style bass line and you wanted to have it do like an octave up jump, you can select the octave by note. This is gate length by note, trigger probability, re-triggers, glide, and then, all different trigger modes down here. So it just gives you, again, a whole bunch of options of different ways to sequence your music. So you get to choose which sequencer you want to use. So we'll go back to the mono one just because it's easier to see visually. I generally use more than any other the multi-track, just because I'm generally going out to a bunch more destinations. But I switched to the mono one for today just because it's a lot easier to view. So that's kind of the Oxy one. Let me know if you have questions about this before we move on to the Elektron ones and how I do random generation with those ones. And what I use those for, because each one of these machines is kind of good at their own stuff, where the other one may be less good, but it's better at something else. And so that's kind of what I wanted to show you guys. So let's see here. Writing tracks feels like work. Yeah. That's true, and I think you just hit it on the head. You said this feels like fun and writing tracks feels like work. I think it's because of method. I think a lot of people, without really meaning to, lock themselves into a very work-like workflow when they're writing tracks. They say, okay, now I'm going to start with the kick. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to go to this. Now I'm going to write a bass line, and they spend 30 minutes working on a bass line. Then they say, okay, now I'm going to add in a hi-hat. Okay, well now I'm going to dial in the sound of that hi-hat. Oh wait, but the kick doesn't sound right now. So I'm going to go back and dial in my kick drum. Then I'm going to say, okay, now I need to do a melody, but I've been doing all this mechanical work for the last hour, and I'm not really very musically inspired to do a melody. So why would you do it? So all of a sudden you're like, this isn't very fun. I'm just going to bag this and go get something to eat. And so I think a lot of people's creative process kind of ends before it should, because they're making it like work, like what you said. They're turning it into work instead of kind of encouraging themselves to explore. And when I built this setup, and it includes my live setup as well, I wanted to build it in such a way that it encourages exploration. I think a lot of people are afraid to explore because when they find something they like, they don't want to move off of it because they're afraid they won't be able to come back to it and get back to that sound or that pattern or that melody or that rhythm or that whatever that they liked. So then they stop changing things and they start to build a song around it. But it may not be the best it can be. But if you've got things that encourage playfulness and exploration, like, for example, having the ability to undo and redo is something that's really key for me on the Oxy. And one of the reasons why I use it as my main sequencer is because it encourages you to say, okay, I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to generate something and let's hear what it sounds like. And then if I'm not sure if I like it or not, I'm going to generate something else. Okay, I like the other one more, I'm going to go back. Now I'm going to generate something else. Okay, I like the other one more, I'm going to go back. Then I generate something else. Ooh, I like this one. So now I'm going to generate something off of that. So now I have the other two that I liked going back. Okay, this one I don't like. Let's go back one. Generate this again. This one I like, so I'm going to keep it. Now I'm going to generate another. I don't like this one. Let's go back one. So then you start to build up this number of tracks or number of patterns that you like all together. Then you can start to play around with them. So again, if we go to what we were just talking about, so let's just generate something randomly and let's hear what it sounds like. Did I change this? Oh yeah, oops, I did. Sorry, I changed where this was sent because we were using the melodic side of stuff. Okay, let's move up our key just a little bit. So let's say we don't like this one, generate another one. Oops. I think this is too low. Here we go. Now we're back into a better range here. So let's do one. I think that's jumping around a little too much. Let's bring that down a little bit. Okay, so let's say we like this one. Now we'll generate a new one. Okay, I don't like this, so let's go back and generate off of that one that we did like. I'm not sure of this one, so let's go back, generate off the one we like. So it's always one step back if you keep doing it this way. Then if you have two that you like, let's say we like this one, now you can generate off of this one. So now I've got this one and the two before I liked. So if I go back, this was another one I liked, and back, that was another one that I liked. So it gives you a chance to keep generating things, getting rid of the ones you don't like and keeping the ones you like and keeping to build those out without having to go in and save those. So again, it encourages playfulness because it's non-destructive. So everything that you're doing won't mess up what you liked before. You can always go back to it from before. With the Elektron sequencers, what they do that's really, really interesting, and I'll kind of go to the Digitag 2 here. What they do that's really interesting is they have the ability to randomize different things than what this randomizes. So if you go to any page on here, so let's say we're going to go to our the source page, which is basically the sound source, that's the sample. And if you hit function yes, you can randomize things on this. Sorry, if you hold down the source and hit yes, you can randomize things on that page, including the sample itself, the tuning, the start point, the end point, the loop of it, the play direction, all of that stuff can be randomized. So you can randomize the creation of sound, where with this, you're not creating any sound with the randomization, you're randomizing the note position or the gate and the pitch. So these two work really well together, because with this, I can randomize sound, and with this, I can randomize pitch and gate. This one doesn't randomize pitch and gate very much. I mean, you can go into, in the sequencer itself, you can go in and with the Euclidean sequencer, you can generate Euclidean sequences, but that's as random as it gets, and it's not really random. So a 16-step Euclidean sequence that has 5 pulses will always have the same rhythm if it's a 16 and a 5. So it's a bit random, but it's not totally random. Whereas with this, I can generate completely random patterns, no matter how I want. And then I can generate randomly the pitch over the top of those patterns. So yeah, so a whole bunch of different options with that. So let's go back to the chat, because I haven't been a little bit. Let's see here. Oh, you just learned a new thing. What did you learn new, Robin? I'm curious, because he's been getting very much into the Oxy One, and figuring out a whole bunch of cool things with it. So can you set a range for pitch? Yes, when you're generating the pitch randomly in here, you have a range. It's a percentage range that can go up to 24% plus or minus. So there's an option to do 24% plus minus, or just plus from your root note. So yeah, so you can choose how broad the range is. So for example, if you bring the range to 0 and then you generate something random, it will only generate the random thing on your root note. So again, if we hit this again so you can hear this. So that's my random pattern on here. So if I generate another, again, only on one note, but if I change that range to, let's say, 10%, if I change it to 24%, and again, if I bring this down to, let's say, I don't know, plus or minus 2%, and again, if I bring this again to 0, it's all going to go back to just one note, and it'll keep it all on the same thing. So yeah, so you do have, again, it's rough control over the range. You can't say I want it to go, 3 notes up and 1 note down as the maximum. So again, they're keeping with the theme of randomness. You can put some guardrails and say, I only want it to go, 5%. But you can't say only 2 notes. And if you're using, so let's say for example, I think, yeah, you can just barely see this. This module right here that has all the lights lit up, if you see, like, they're basically the lights of a piano keyboard. This is a quantizer. So if I was to run a signal through this that had kind of random pitch, I can select individually what notes I want it to choose from, and it will quantize that signal to the nearest note. So I can say, I only want it to use these 3 notes, and I can send it a range of like unlimited, and it will quantize into those. And then I can set the key up here. So I can say I want it to be this key and only use these notes within that key. So this has a lot more control over individual things like that. A device like the Oxy doesn't have that. Some devices do. That's just not something that they built into this one. So it's, again, it kind of sticks with that theme of using randomness, because you can, you're not totally in control, I guess is the best way to put it, because you can only set the guardrails by percentage. So percentage of range, randomness, and density. So you're not saying I want 8 nodes. You're saying I want, 50% density. So that might be 8, might be 6, might be 7, might be 9. It's going to be ish in that range. So it's something that I really personally like, but it may not be for you if you're looking for more control than that. The other thing too is that because of the ability to go in and modify things afterwards, you don't necessarily need that. So like, let's say we set the range somewhere and it put the notes too crazy and they were going too far out. Well, you can always move individual notes, right? And move those around. So you can hone that in afterwards. So this is really, for me, an idea generator. So it just like puts it out there, and then I do something with that idea that was generated by the machine. So let's see here. Hi from Germany. That's a bunch from Germany now. That's cool. Welcome, guys. Willkommen. So you don't use the splitter, you use the HDMI to the other device, and then the small jacks DIN from there to the instruments? No. So basically, 2 different signal paths. The HDMI is just for CV and gate. So it's for the 8 CV and the 8 gate that are coming out of the back here. Instead of cabling into my modular, I can just do the HDMI cable to this one modular unit, and this has 8 CV and 8 gate outputs. So those can be patched over into the case. And then when I disconnect it, I just disconnect one cable instead of 16 cables having to be connected and disconnected every time I add the Oxy 1. What the split is for the MIDI signal alone. So there's a MIDI, TRS MIDI out from the back of this that goes to the TRS MIDI in, and then you've got DIN MIDI and TRS MIDI out from this that you can go on 3 different signal paths, A, B, C, and each one of them has 16 different MIDI channels. So the CV gate is separate from the MIDI, but you can send anything in here to any of those destinations. So I can take something that's going on, CV1 gate 1, and I can send that out via MIDI C7 to a different instrument just by changing the parameters in the machine. And say that channel, instead of going here, now I want it to go here. And it'll change it up as long as I have everything connected. I didn't connect this today. I'll connect this for the next time so I can show you how that works. I should have done it this time, but I completely spaced it out. So yeah, so they're not separate, they're not, the pipe and the HDMI cable has nothing to do with MIDI, and the split and the MIDI out going to this has nothing to do with CV or gate. They're 2 totally separate things. But because they're coordinated within the Oxy, you can use it to choose any one of those destinations to send anything there, and you can move it around really super easy, which is amazing. So let's see here on the chat. Hey, hola, Erika. That's my wife. She's upstairs. Above the trees. Hey, good to see you again. This video game going to cost me $700. Yeah, they're not cheap. I mean, and I will not pretend to say that they are, but for me, there's a really legit reason for me to have this. I don't have it because it's something to play around with. It's something that is really key to my personal process. It's the centerpiece of my writing process and the centerpiece of my live performance process. And because of all the reasons that we said, because of all that flexibility. And again, my workflow for both of those things may be a little chaotic for some people because I do a lot of improvisation. I do a lot of making things up on the fly when I'm playing live. So I need gear that can go on that ride with me, that can make things up on the fly, but keep within a certain set of kind of guardrails or parameters in order to make it not just sound like stupid all over the place. So yeah, it's important for me, but it's not necessarily important for everybody. And some people may not need all that connectivity, which is great. There's other options than that, far less expensive options. But yeah, if you need all of this connectivity, it's in the same range as any of the other sequencers that are in this price range. I think the Hapex is more than this one. I think the Torso is really similar, maybe slightly less, but they're all kind of in that same range. Kind of thinking of, you know, whatever your preferences are, they're all going to be in a similar price range. Let's see here. Hey, I was wondering if you ever tried the OG machine drum. Yeah, I've played around with it quite a bit. It's tons of fun, lots of fun. It's really hard. I think that a lot of times, kind of classic instruments, particularly in the synth space, have a certain mystique because of what they are. And so people say like, oh, this is the best thing. Well, it was maybe the best thing at its time. They do certain things that are amazing. Like the machine drum has an amazing sound to it. It sounds very kind of gritty, almost lo-fi because of, you know, the quality of the hardware at that time, right? It wasn't necessarily by choice that they stumbled upon this amazing sound that it has. You know, obviously they did a lot of it on purpose, but I think a lot of it came from the actual components that they used on it. So yeah, it's very cool. And it's, I get asked a lot on these streams and when I talk to people in person about new versions of the old gear that Elektron put out, because I use Elektron gear a lot. And they talk about like, I want them to do a new machine drum, or I want them to do a new mono machine. And it's like, well, there is a new machine drum. It's called the Analog Rhythm. And there's a new mono machine. It's called the Analog 4 or the Syntact. So what they did was they took those things and they changed them up. They built off of them. They improved on some things they left out because they didn't think they were as necessary anymore, or they couldn't get the components, or there was a different way of doing things now. But these are the evolution of those things. You know, just like a TR-8S is the evolution of the 909. It's not a 909, but it's what the 909 became after all those years. And so I think that's kind of where these are. And if you want the old sound, I would say use the old gear. Don't wait for a new version of the old gear, because they most likely won't do it. So, and that's why they're so great. That's why so many people have 909s. That's why they cost whatever, $7,000 if you want to buy one right now. And, you know, these are machines that cost $500 new. And there's been times in history where you could get them for $100 in a pawn shop. Now they're $7,000 because people want that particular sound and workflow. It's just like a 303, for example. 303 has one of the most difficult, convoluted, and unfun workflows of any machine, yet they're so popular. They're more than $5,000 because people want to use the old gear. And it may or may not be for the sound, because there's plenty of other things that sound like 303s now, but there's something about using the old gear and using the older workflow that encourages a certain type of creativity. So I totally get that. And that's the way I feel about the machine drum and the mono machine and a whole bunch of the others as well. So Detroit here, see you at KnobCon. Yes, I will for sure be at KnobCon. So if any of you are going to be at KnobCon, I look forward to seeing y'all there. Hi from Berlin. Oh man, I miss Berlin. I was in Berlin a month ago for Superbooth, and it is such a cool city and one of my favorite places. So I can't wait to get back and visit you all in Berlin. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate that. Let's see, been eyeing that box for a while. I live loop on smaller sequencers. Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between this and live looping because although, interestingly enough, and I haven't used that at all, he just built into the most recent update the ability to live loop the MIDI in this. So you can set start and end points and loop sections of your patterns, which, to be honest, I can't even show you right now because I don't remember how to do it. But it's something that this does now. And if you have, let's say you've got that, the multi-track sequencer where you've got 8 different tracks on one page, you can loop different sections of each one of those sequencers. So you don't have to just loop the audio. You can actually loop the MIDI and then send that MIDI to any audio source, having it looped, which is, again, a lot of fun. So yeah. That's here. I have an Analog 4 Mark II, Rhythm Mark II, and recently picked up the Machine Drum, in love with it. Switched LCD screens to white on black. Oh, that's good. Yeah, those older machines. I have a Rhythm Mark I and also a Rhythm Mark II, but the Rhythm Mark I, that older screen is a nightmare to try to see, especially because I'm used to the screen on the Rhythm Mark II. So if you swap those out, that's awesome. But yeah, it's cool. Again, it's like getting a 909. Like if I had a 909, that would be awesome, but there's no real reason to have a 909 unless I wanted to actually physically play with, touch, use, control a 909, then you can do that. And if you can't afford it, you can get one of the Behringer RD9s because they feel very similar. But like if I want 909 sounds, I can do 909 sounds on a TR-8. I could do 909 sounds on my analog rhythm. I could do 909 sounds on an MPC. So it's not necessarily about the sound, but it's this combination of sound and kind of classic workflow. It's kind of like driving an antique car. Like it's cool, it's fun. It's not as fun as driving a Tesla, but it's fun in a totally different way that is less performant and louder and less comfortable, but in some ways feels cooler. And so I feel like a lot of this older gear is very much the same way. There's this charm to it that is that's really cool. Let's see, love the simple workflow of Machine Drum and the sound. Yeah, the sound is great. And a lot of that, I mean, you can get a lot of that sound with the Analog Rhythm Mark II, but you have to do stuff with the master overdrive, and you have to do stuff with kind of like using samples and changing the quality of the samples and stuff. So it's not as easy. So again, with the Machine Drum, if that's the sound you're looking for, it's amazing. Another thing that's cool with the Machine Drum, if you've got that with the Rhythm Mark II, sample a bunch of one-shots from the Machine Drum, put them in the Rhythm Mark II, and then layer synths with it, and you can create, an infinite amount of absolutely crazy, awesome sounds. So you get kind of the best of both worlds that way. Let's see here. I'm using the Poly-N Play for inspiration. I think it would be a good addition. Yeah, Poly-N Play is great. And the thing for me that was really hard with the Poly-N Play, when I messed around with it, is that I like to write stuff like what you're seeing right now, and then once I have a pattern and a melody or a bass line or whatever that I like, then I like to go in and sound design. And the hard thing for me with the Poly-N Play was the workflow where you have to assign the sound first and then do the stuff with it. And it was really difficult for me to kind of shift gears in that, and it kind of went against the way my workflow works with every other piece of gear that I have. So that's one reason why I don't have one. It's not that they're not good. I think they're awesome. I saw a friend of mine do a whole live set just on a Poly-N Play, and it was, absolutely killed it. So yeah, if you gel with that workflow, it's a great machine. It's a really great machine. So let's see here. Yes, you can get an RE909. I just saw the other day, somebody was selling on Reverb an unbuilt, one of the RE909 kits that had the black plate. And I'm all about the black aesthetic. So when I saw that, I was like super tempted, but then I was like, no, it's so expensive for that. And I don't really need a 909, but yeah, that would be cool. So may still be on there. So if you're looking for an RE909, go check it out on Reverb. Let's see. Webbit, you learned about the options below 1%. Oh yeah, I mean, that's probably that random generation options that are below the density thing. That's probably the function on the Oxy One that I use more than any other function, is that random note generation without changing the gate. Because I tend to like to build my own rhythms, my own gate patterns, and just like to put things out that I like, and then to be able to just generate pitch on top of something that a groove I've already created that I like. I love that capability of this machine, and I haven't found anything else that does that, at least not as functionally as this one does. So, oh, you just finished building one. Yeah, they're awesome. I would love to build one. The 303 is awful to program. I 100% agree with you, Todd. It is awful. It's funny too. You notice it even more. I have one of the boutique Roland 303s, and that has the two different programming modes. So you can do classic mode, or you can switch it to like a traditional sequencer mode, a way to program things. And it's never more obvious how hard that other sequencer method is until you've done them both. And then you're just like, oh my God, like, why did anybody ever do things this way? And I know people actually who totally prefer the old method. And that's one of the things that's great about gear today, is that there's so many different ways to use it, and everybody's mind works differently. So like, I did not click with that at all, but I have friends of mine that they don't click with a traditional sequencer method, and they can just whip things out that sound amazing on that classic 303 sequencer programming, which I think it's funny. It doesn't gel with me for sure, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means my head works a totally different way. Awful is debatable. It's part of its magic. Yeah, I guess you could say. It all depends. If creativity blocking inconvenience is code for magic, then yes, I get it. But I joke. I mean, I understand that different workflows encourage you to create different things and to work differently than you would, and you'll create different things on different workflows, which I am 100% for, and I think it's amazing. I joke a lot about the Roland workflow because Roland machines in general have this workflow that's really complicated and convoluted and difficult, and there's not a lot of flow to it for me, the way my mind works. A friend of mine that you probably have watched his YouTube channel before as well, says that Roland things have a hostile workflow, that they're working against you, which I always thought was really funny. But yeah, it's funny because I say this as I have a Roland over my shoulder, but the SH101 is not the classic Roland workflow. You see everything on the face of it, and there are no deep menus. There's a sequencer on here, which I never use. I sequence it from other stuff because of exactly what we're talking about. But the workflow itself, you can look at this and you can see exactly what a sound is going to sound like by looking at the settings. And you can change things and just know exactly what's going to come out the other end. So it's the opposite. It's a very immediate workflow. But yeah, the 303 workflow is interesting. Let's see here. Seeing it at KnobCon. Oh, that's right. The nerd with the wind controller. He was telling us on the last stream that's why his screen name is the Breathalyzer, because he plays synths using the breath controllers, like the wind controllers, which is super cool. I love that kind of interesting input stuff. I think it's a lot of fun. There's a decent 909 app on iOS. Yes, there is. I have it, and I've actually used it with this method that I was talking about, where you can sequence, from the Oxy, and you can have this multi-track sequencer be all the tracks in the 909 on one channel of your AUM in your iPad or in your phone. So, yeah. Talk to Wabbit about that. He is all about the iPad and AUM and that stuff. He's really good at it. Check out his channel, by the way, because he's got a lot of cool stuff about that, which is fun to watch. Definitely have 808 and 909 samples in the rhythm. Yeah, I mean, that's the core of everything. Until I got recently the battering RAM, which is the sequencer the drum module that I'm using in my case now. Until I got that, I was using drum sounds for my kick drums that were made in the analog rhythm using 909 samples and layering them with the drum synths in the rhythm to create kicks, and then resampling those internally and taking that sample and loading it either into the Digitact or from the rhythm or wherever. But that's where all my kicks for the last few years came from, was layering 909 sounds with the synths inside the rhythm. That's why it's my favorite drum machine. Let's see, where are we here? Audio Kit Pro did it. Yes. Lots of fun apps that provide great sounds on the iPad. Yep, 100%. And Wabbit is all about that stuff, which is great. I love watching his stuff on there. That's actually how I found his channel originally, is I was looking at how to get AUM set up in my iPad, and I saw that, I found his channel that way. Let's see what else. Mobile devices are nice for vacations. Yeah, I travel a lot with my day job, and so it's nice to be on a plane and all I have to bring is the Oxy One, because I always have my phone with me, I always have an iPad with me. So it's like, as long as you've got some soft synths loaded into those, you can use the Oxy One, and you're using your same workflow that you would use, plug this in, your same workflow that you would use in your home studio, and you don't have to do something totally different. And that for me was one of the big pluses of using the Oxy One in this way, is that yeah, you can do everything on your phone or on your iPad, or you can take a little groove box with you, or, you know, an OP1 if that's your style, or, you know, an MPC or one of the Elektron boxes or whatever. But if it's not what you're using all the time, either to perform live or in your studio, then you're using a different workflow, and then you have to kind of translate that when you get back. With the Oxy One, it's cool because that's what I use actually to perform already, and that's what I use to produce with already. So if I'm doing that stuff when I'm on the road, I'm just getting better and better at the same gear that I'm using on a regular basis anyway. So yeah, I love that fact about it. So let's see. Those old Motorola cold-fired chips in the machine drum and mono machine have a sound for sure. It's very crispy and wavetable-like. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, is it's kind of like, we can go back and talk about the 303. The reason why the 303 failed when it first came out is because it was supposed to replace bass players in live bands, and it didn't sound enough like an actual bass player. So they were like, well, this sound is awful, I don't want to use this, throw it away. And then they were worth nothing for a little while, until they started, you know, until Pierre and others decided to create acid music on them, and they came up with this new way to use them. But who's to say what's good and bad? You know, that's one of the things, one of the reasons why I love techno and why I play and make techno, is because I like the fact that there aren't rules. It's not like it has to sound a certain way. You know, if you're doing, you know, orchestral music, there's a sound to it. There's, you know, if you're playing blues rock, there's a sound to it. And I think with techno, yes, there are some sounds, but I think those sounds get pushed all the time, and the boundaries are constantly being pushed, and that's one of my favorite parts about it. So, yeah. Let's see here. It's nothing like old school workflow on a 909. Recently, my friend has released Revolution version 5 firmware for that. Yeah, so the 909s, the 909 workflow is cool. The workflow, I tend to use other devices in a really similar way to the way you would use a 909. So like the sequencers on the Percons, each one of these is basically like a 909 sequencer, like to the point where if you press once on something, you get a regular note, and if you press twice, you get an accent, just like you do on a 909. So this works very similarly to a 909. Each one of these rows, and the same thing with the analog rhythm. You've still got that same 16 steps across the bottom. It's very immediate look and feel when you're in it. You just have more capability to change up the sound. And so that's why, for me, my favorite drum machine ever is the analog rhythm. And that's why, just because of all the things that it can do. It can do what the other ones can do and more. But yeah, there's definitely some charm with the 909. I've played with a lot of them. I had an RD9 for a while, but I just wasn't using it, so I sold it. But yeah, they're cool for sure, and they sound great. I mean, the funny thing about 909s is everybody else talks about the kick and how great the kick is, and unless you're listening to the kick on a sound system that has a really great low end, it doesn't sound very good when you're listening like in your studio. And then all of a sudden you'll go to play something out in a club that has a sub, and that kick is just thunderous. But you miss a lot of it because there's so much of it that's in that low end that a lot of speakers don't have the bass response to play. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Only reason I keep the TD3 is to use the web editor over USB. Yeah, it's a lot easier. You can still get the sounds, but with but sequencing it from something else. Made myself learn the TD3, but only to sequence it externally. Yeah, I actually sequence my the boutique one that I have just the same way. Just I sequence it externally a lot. Again, you'll see a common thread here. I like the Oxy One sequencer, so I can sequence the 303 with this because this has slides, this has octave jumps, this has all that kind of stuff that you can sequence into it. So you can get a 303 and make it sound like that. Or you can just send it to something like the Ericsson's bass line that I have in my modular case, which sounds very much like a 303, especially when you sequence it from the Oxy, because then you can sequence in those slides and octave jumps and all that kind of stuff too. So get a lot of flexibility. Let's see here. Being able to click with the workflow is so underrated. I think it is the absolute most important thing. And I will preach that to the end of time. There is no best this, best that for everybody. It all depends on you as a person. And there are certain things that I particularly like in workflows, and I gravitate towards gear that works that way. But if you don't work that same way, you might hate that piece of gear, and you might have another thing that you're like, man, this workflow is awesome. And I might go, man, my brain just does not work that way. So the way things, the way you kind of interact with the workflow, I think is more important than anything else. I think a perfect example is the Elektron boxes. I click really well with the Elektron workflow. That's why I use those boxes. They're not magic. You know, there's plenty of other things, like there's a lot of Roland gear that sounds better than the Elektron gear, but I don't click with that workflow. I click with this workflow. So, and then there's other people that are the opposite. Like I have a friend of mine in Canada who's got his whole live rig is all Roland gear. And when I look at that, I was like, oh my God, the amount of brain damage that it would take me to use his gear is crazy. But he loves it and clicks with it and can fly around it. And he kind of feels the same about Elektron. Like he just can't wrap his head around the way it works, just like I can't with Roland gear. And so, yeah, the workflow is key. I also think, you know, it's funny, and this is a whole other topic maybe, but I think it's funny, it's not just workflow that I think is so important. I also think that that aesthetic, as superficial as it sounds, the aesthetic of your gear influences your inspiration when you're using the gear. And I kind of accidentally proved this to myself when I got the anniversary edition Digitact, the silver one. The very first thing when I kind of sat down and plugged it was identical to my other Digitact. Like they didn't functionally change anything. It just looked different. And on my Digitact for the past few years, I had been making banging techno all the time, like hard stuff. Then I get this silver shiny box with white buttons, with the white screen, and just a different aesthetic, and just started just like writing stuff quick, just kind of coming up with random new ideas. And the very first thing I wrote on it was this super deep, groovy, deep house track. And it was because I feel that it's because I was influenced by the aesthetic of the machine. And so it's funny, if you look at my live rig, like even all my modular that is in my live rig is all black faceplates. Like I'll spend an extra $20 to buy a black faceplate and change it out myself just to keep that aesthetic because I like it. With this one, it doesn't matter as much. Like in this case, with this setup, I've got like a lot of different stuff. And for me, I think that's kind of important because I didn't want it to be one way of working with this. And I also like that with this many modules in one place, they kind of break each other up. I was talking to my friend Alex Anderson, ALX106. If you're Alex106, if you follow him, he was talking to me about the same thing, and he said the same thing. He likes different colors when you've got like the silver and black, when you've got a big setup, because it helps break it up. So it doesn't all just look like one thing, and you have to kind of figure out like, oh, is this jack on this module or on this module? Like where are they? And when it's broken up like this, it definitely helps with some things. Although here I've got them kind of grouped together, but I don't know, that's because of how I built this case, like the way I built it and the way I organized it. I didn't really have any choice. If you're a modular person, you probably use modular grid. And I spent, I don't know, before I started putting modules into this, I probably spent 3 weeks moving stuff around in modular grid until I found exactly the setup that I wanted. And that's this. That's what I ended up with. But it was very kind of purposeful the way I set this up. And it was like trying to find that mix of having everything where you want it so that it works, like workflow wise, works the way you want it to, but also having it fit. That's the other thing with modular, right? Is like, oh, I've got, this much space. What can I put in that space that goes with what I'm doing now? So yeah, it's, this was all based around exactly what we're talking about: workflow, aesthetic, all of that stuff. The only one that gets me a little bit is the Starlab, the Striving Starlab, because it's blue, but whatever. There's a black faceplate I could buy for it, but I just don't feel like that yet. And again, with this one, it doesn't matter as much because I don't mind if it's all mixed up. I think if it was in my live rig, I would definitely get the black faceplate for sure, but that's just me. So let's see what else here. Oxy nailed that. Hapex no slides. Yeah, unfortunately. Above the trees, taken off. Cool. We'll see you next time. All about the workflow. Yeah, you have to find what works for you. And that's the thing. There's no perfect piece of gear. There's no perfect setup. Anybody who tells you there is full of it, or they're trying to sell you something. Like, honestly, the reason I have the gear I have and the reason I talk about on this channel the gear that I talk about, it's because it's the stuff that I like and it's the stuff that works for me. And if it doesn't work for you, I totally get that. Like I've seen it firsthand. There are plenty of pieces of hardware, modular sequencers, groove boxes, drum machines that I've tried that other people just absolutely love and they don't click. I think a perfect example for me was I got an MPC Live 2 when they came out, the one with the speaker, because I'd been hearing for years, oh, you got to try an MPC, you got to try an MPC, they're so good, they're so good. And I didn't click with it at all. It wasn't a workflow that clicked with me. But then I have friends that they've been using MPCs for decades, and that's like, they've written all their best music on MPCs and they just love the workflow. So I'm like, that's awesome. Find what works for you and use that. Like the course that I'm starting now that some of you have already signed up for, which thank you guys very much if you have. But the course, I got asked today if the course is gear specific. Are there specific pieces of gear that you're going to go into? Obviously, I'm going to use my gear for it, but there's nothing in the course that you couldn't do with other gear. And I talk a lot about that in the course, saying, families of gear, certain things, certain types of gear, yes, but a specific company, a specific model, a specific thing, no, not at all. It's like you do you find what works for you. And I've seen people do absolutely, if any of you guys have ever seen Stimming play live, he plays live right now with like a 1010 black box, a 1010 blue box, and two of their little mini synth machines, like the Lemon Drop and one of the other ones. And then he uses a Teenage Engineering TX6 mixer, that little tiny mini mixer. And so his whole live setup could fit in a tiny little backpack. Like it could fit in, a tiny bag. And that's what he plays live around the world with, because he found a workflow that he really likes, and he likes something that goes. For me, that would be a bit too small. It would be a bit too, there's certain times when I have larger buttons or larger knobs so that I can actually have finer control over things. But if you find what works for you, that's absolutely amazing. Like, use what works for you. Like Wabbit, for example, he uses a lot of stuff that in iOS. That's amazing. Like, that's so cool. What a great way to try things out, to use things, to have a ton of flexibility with what you use without having to be tied to a DAW and a computer and all that stuff. You can just open up a soft synth that's by itself and grab a sequencer and play around with it. I think find what works for you. I will never tell you what you should get and what you shouldn't get. I'll tell you what I like and don't like and why. But none of that is on you. Then it's up to you to choose what you like and don't like and why. So let's see here. Yep, aesthetic equals user experience. Yeah, it's a huge part of it. I mean, for me, that whole user experience is aesthetic and workflow. Those two things together are the experience of using a piece of gear. Like, I'm not a big keyboard player, but I do have a few keyboards that I love and that I play and that I really enjoy. I have a Polybrute, and I just love playing it because part of it is the look and feel, like how the knobs feel, having the wood that's on there, the touch strip, the way it feels to touch different parts of it. It's one thing I love about the Percons. Like, I use this thing all the time because I love the feel of the knobs. I love the click of the buttons. It's being able to have switches that you can turn this or like flip the switch. There's something very tactile that makes that much more fun to use than something else. So, but that's, again, for me, and not everybody digs that. Let's see. You think a black Percons would change how you use it? Yeah, it's so funny you say that. If somebody came to me today, if there's anybody on this stream today that has a black Percons and that wants to trade me for the blue one, I would trade it in a second. And it's because I'm all about the aesthetic. This is cool. I think it's a cool idea. The reasoning behind where this paint color came from, I think, was really cool and interesting. It's just, for me, again, the aesthetic. It's not, I think I would click much more with the black one. I mean, and again, I love this. I use it all the time, but I don't know. I just know me personally, and I know that with a black one, I would be much happier. So if anybody wants to trade, I'm all about it. So if you're watching the video live, or if you watch this later and you want to trade, definitely let me know. Let's see here, black face plates. Yes, I'm all about the black. When I actually, a bunch of things here that for this rig, I traded with a lot of people gear that I had that I wasn't using. And one of the people who's actually on the stream right now, I traded with a bunch of gear, and I didn't tell him this, but I was so psyched because I didn't know which color some of the modules were that he was sending me, and I was so excited that the Data, the Zadar, and the Batumi were all the black versions of them. Had they been the silver versions, I would have been fine because I was trading really for functionality and it's for this one. But when they showed up and they were the black ones, I was extra psyched. So yeah, I'm all about that. Big fan of the aesthetic for sure. Elektron workflow and layout is amazing for me personally. Yeah, and it's not for everybody. I understand that, but it makes sense for my brain, and other workflows don't. So, or some other workflows don't. It makes more sense than others. I also like the fact, if you've used a bunch of the Elektron boxes, any one of the modern Elektron boxes, the workflow is the same from box to box. So I love the fact that, when the Syntac first came out and I first got it, I was making music on it in 30 seconds because it was the exact same workflow as the Digitact and as the Digitone. So it was like, okay, cool, I could just jump right in this. It's no problem at all. And you learn, there's little details that are different, but being able to have the functional core of the workflow be the same from machine to machine is, it's really cool. It's something that works well for me. Yep, stemming's awesome. he does some great stuff. Super polished and pro. You know what I love about stimming? I love that he just does not give a shit about, like, where does my music fit? Is it popular? What genre does it go in? Whatever. He's just like, I'm gonna make stuff that I dig and that makes me dance and that makes me, you know, that I'm into. And if you like it, that's cool. And I respect that very much. I love, I'm a big fan of make and play the music that you love. And if other people happen to love it too, that's awesome. But when you start to make music just so that people will like it or like you, it starts down kind of a darker path. You know, it's like that whole social media path of trying to get acceptance and likability and all that stuff. So yeah. Oh, you're watching the stimming masterclass now. That's cool. Yeah, that would be cool. I haven't seen that one. Yeah, stimming melodies are cool. I love how they're kind of, it's funny, stimming is like a more restrained, his melodies for me are like a more restrained version of cuckoo, where they get these kind of like this cool, like bouncy randomness, fun, melodic stuff. Cuckoo's a little bit more kind of cuckoo, a little bit more out there, but I think stimming has that same kind of playfulness in his music, which I really love as well. You know, I'm a big fan when people are having fun making music, you know. Let's see here. The differences in how gear leaves its mark on the music almost explains entirely why I spend too much. Yeah, I can see that. It's interesting though, when you talk about different hardware leaving its mark, you can see as certain, you know, particularly in electronic music, it's a lot easier. I mean, the same thing happens with all types of music, but it's really evident with electronic music because things can get really different really fast. And you can see how the sound of music in general changed at certain points in history when certain pieces of gear came out. You know, like if you were to take like a Korg M1 and you just scroll through the presets, you would hear every mid-90s house track you've ever thought of in those presets. You know, it's the same if you take a DX7 and you play through those presets, you hear every synthwave track from the late 80s coming out of those things. And it's because a piece of gear came out, musicians all went, wow, this is so cool and new and different. I want to make something with this. Then they all made stuff with that, and that became the sound of the time, you know? And it's the same whether it's a 303, whether it's an 808, whether it's a 909. When groups of musicians latch onto a specific piece of gear, you hear, you know, you hear similar things coming out all the time, and it becomes the sound of an era, which I think is yeah, it's super cool. It's fun to listen back like that. There's a couple of cool videos on YouTube if you ever watch them, where they'll do like the classic synth sounds of a particular time period, and they'll show you the individual piece of gear that they were played on, and it's so cool to hear because it's like it totally brings me back. I remember those sounds, and it's great. You know, like the like something as iconic as, you know, the bass line from Show Me Love, that's an organ preset from the M1. So it's like you play that preset and you're like, oh, I can play that song, because I don't have to make up some crazy weird sound from that nobody's ever heard before. I know right where that is. You can go right straight to it. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Let's see here. If you learn it really well, you could just take the case out and spray paint it black. Yeah, I could, but it's easy enough now that the black ones are out that I'll just switch one for a black one as soon as I find somebody willing to make the trade with me. That would be cool. Let's see. Stimmy Masterclass is the only one I purchased, and I don't regret it. Yeah, it's cool. I would love to see that one. I haven't seen that one yet. The organ patch still gives you feels. Yeah, it's you hear it right in there. You hear what's the Gypsy Woman. You hear Show Me Love. You hear like all those classic 90s kind of big room diva house tracks. when you play an M1, like scroll through the presets and you just hit a note and go, oh, that's that song. You'll go to the next preset and hit a note and go, oh, that's that song. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. D50 is all 80s. Yep, it certainly is. Yeah, the kick, the toms, the ride, and the hats on the 909, for sure. I mean, the 909 kick, open and closed hats and clap, for me, that's very house techno, you know, from the 90s all the way to today. Like I'll hear a new techno track that'll come out and I'll be like, oh, that's a 909 clap. Like you can just hear it instantly. And it's funny because that piece of gear has been around for decades and it's still the go-to because it's still that sound that you latch onto and go, oh yeah, that sounds like house music. That sounds like techno music. You know, it's like an 808, sounds like hip hop. And you can make these things, you can make these genres of music. It's like the way I would equate it for the non-synth world is I grew up playing guitar in bands and playing like blues rock cover bands, and I always played a Fender Strat because what we were playing was Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton and all of these artists that they all played a Strat. So if I wanted to play their music and have it sound right, I needed to play the gear they were playing, you know, and so it's kind of that thing. Like if you want to make synthwave and have it sound like late 80s, just get a DX7 and just play your DX7. You know, if you want to play synth parts and have it sound like, you know, 70s rock band keyboard player stuff, get a Moog Model D, because that's what they were all using at that time. So it's pretty funny. It's funny how music inspires different people to do different things, for sure. Let's see here. The worst trend in techno these days is ripped parts of 80s, 90s great tracks and hard techno garbage after the main riff part. Yeah, I try not to sound like the grumpy old man very often when I'm talking about modern music. I just think it's a little, I don't know what's the best word to describe it. It's almost like a cop-out. Like it's almost too easy. It's like, take a song everybody knows and put a modern beat with it. Now that's been done forever and people have always done that, and it goes all the way back to, you know, people have been sampling and all that stuff. But I think there's a difference in what I've heard recently where it's not taking a sample and making it into a new track. It's taking an entire classic track and just adding a new kick drum to it and changing the vocal. So, and again, that's not new. All you have to do is listen to anything that Daft Punk has ever done, and they made an incredible catalog of amazing music by ripping entire tracks and just putting new vocals and new drums with them. So this isn't new. I just think the fact that it is the most popular thing out there right now, and everybody's just kind of doing that over and over and over and over again, is it's a little discouraging, because it's like I'm always interested in saying, like, what's new? What are people creating and coming up with that's new? But again, it's not a new thing. So it's like, you know, like if you listen, like we were just talking about Daft Punk, if you listen to Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, and then you go back and you listen to Cola Bottle Baby from Edwin Birdsong, it's the entire song. Like they just took the vocals and they took the entire song and just added a different vocal on it and added new drums. So again, it's not new and it's not always wrong. When they did it, it was kind of new and clever and creative. But the fact that it's not this particular thing that I get discouraged about. What I get discouraged about is when one thing gets popular and then everybody tries to do exactly the same thing. And that's where I get discouraged. And it's not necessarily the sampling a track and doing that. If one or two people did that, that would be amazing. That would be super cool, and do that and have that be your signature thing. But what I feel like happens a lot these days, and I think a lot of it is because, and this is me coming from the DJ and producer world as well, is that what I think is happening a lot now because of the internet, everybody has access to all the same music. And not only that, but they have access, almost in real time to all of the DJ sets of all of their favorite DJs, and they're playing the music of all of their favorite producers. So what it does is it makes everybody have exactly the same inspirations all at the same time. And I think young producers wanting to make a name for themselves, it used to be make a name for yourself by doing something new and different. And I think that now there's a lot of make a name for yourself by replicating what's popular and then just continuing that on. And so that's what I get discouraged by, is when music starts to sound really similar, all the new things that are coming out, and it's rare. There's still a lot of amazing music coming out, don't get me wrong, but I think a lot of it gets buried inside a lot of things that are people just trying to do the same as what everybody else is doing because they say, well, that's popular for them. I want to be popular, so I'm going to do what they're doing, rather than saying, I have this creative new idea. So I don't know. But again, that's the grumpy old man in me. So maybe it doesn't mean anything. So let's see here. Now you're saying you're 41. Yeah, everybody's got their age in here now. I get that. I'm quite a bit older than that. I remember 41 vaguely. Crash ride, hi-hat, samples. What was this from? Oh yeah, exactly. How do you route signals from your synths and modular setup to your Elektron Octatrack? Do you connect them through a mixer, sound card, or do you sample them into a DAW? So, great question. So the way this is set up right now is, this is set up kind of in a more of a songwriting production mode, and I use Ableton when I'm doing that. But I use Ableton really as a multi-track recorder. So I don't know if you can see, maybe I can turn this. There is, oh no, that won't turn all the way around there. Never mind. Down here, down there around the corner, if you're watching on the screen, I have an audio interface that all of this stuff is going into. So the Percons, the Detact, the SH101, and the modular all have, and this kick drum is going into its own track. They all have individual channels in the audio interface that they're going into, and that's connected and going into Ableton. I also have a mixer over on the other side that has other stuff going into it, and I created a composite audio device in Mac, which allows Ableton to identify multiple audio interfaces as one input device. So then you can have as many tracks as you want to going in. So I've got one interface here with 8 or 10 tracks going in. And then I've got a 24 track mixer over there that has other things going in as well. So now that's going to change. I will let you know right now. Well, actually, before I say what's still happening here as well, Syntact and Analog Rhythm are both going into Ableton via Overbridge. So they're multi-tracking in. So the Syntact has 12 tracks plus the effects track and the input through tracks. Rhythm is the same. It's got it's 8 different voices plus effects track and things like that. So multiple inputs going into Ableton. And right now, coming from the whole modular setup, I only have 2 inputs. One is this kick drum that's going in on its own separate channel, and then the other is the main outs coming from this WMD performance mixer that's right here. So everything's getting mixed here as kind of a sub mix, and then it's going out as a stereo pair out into one track in Ableton. Now, what's going to change coming up soon? I have the WMD Performance Mixer Mark II coming in the next week or two to do beta test for them. And so that's going to take up this place, and I'm going to get the DB25 adapter for that. So then what I'll be able to do is have every one of the 8 tracks from the mixer have its own outputs that I can then send into the audio interface. So then anything that's coming into here, into this mixer, can be multi-tracked into Ableton. Right now, this is all being summed into one stereo pair, and that's going out to Ableton. So I'm only using kind of 1 track at a time the way I'm doing this right now, because I'm writing stuff and recording those loops into Ableton. And then going on to the next thing and recording that one. So I don't really need multiple tracks, but as soon as I get that new mixer and I get that installed in here, I'm gonna be multi-tracking out. So that way, coming out of the DB25, I'll go into my audio interface over here, multi-tracked, and then I'll just update my Ableton template so that it's got a track per channel that's coming from the mixer, just like I have right now. And right now, just so you know, if anybody's thinking about getting the Digitac 2, it doesn't have overbridge support yet. They're still working on that. So this is just going out as a stereo pair, audio only going into Ableton. But as soon as overbridge is ready for this, then I'll switch that to USB, and it will go in over USB via overbridge. And so that way I'll have 16 tracks multi-tracked from that as well. So yeah, so that's how everything's going in from an audio standpoint. And then because it's all going into Ableton, and because I still wanted this to be kind of a hardware focused writing area, that's why I have the push over here. And the push is really set up, right now it's in controller mode, so it's set up to control Ableton, which is kind of back behind me here. So I can still use this to mix. So I've got like the mixer page up right now. So I can use this to mix different things. I can use it to arm and record different tracks, different multi-track things. If I want to try out different effects, I can add those devices here. So I don't have to constantly go back to the computer and kind of mouse click and do whatever. But you could do that with any of the pushes, by the way. You don't need the push 3. So if you have, like if you have push 2, which you can get super cheap right now that this came out, you can do exactly the same thing. And that way you don't have to have your computer open all the time, or you don't, even if you have it open, you don't have to always use it and use like mouse click and use that as your workflow. You can still have your workflow be very hands-on this way. There's other things that the push 2 can do that I'm actually not using right now, but I've thought a bunch about. It's got CV and gate outputs as well, so I can do things like sequence the SH101, or I can send clock to my modular, I can sequence the modular, but I don't really need to because I have the Oxy one. So I kind of use the Oxy to sequence Ableton rather than using Ableton to sequence other stuff, because I don't think the sequencers in Ableton are very good. There's none that are very fun to use, because even the ones that have really good capabilities it's still kind of mouse click, which is, it's harder with this. I like to be able to do multiple things at once. And you can't do that so much within Ableton. So anyway, thanks for the good question. Yeah, that's how everything is routed. And as far as sampling, I'm not, right now, everything's going into the DAW, but I do have the idea that once overbridge is done with the Digitac, and once I can multi-track from the modular using that new mixer, I'm gonna reroute one of the outputs from Ableton to the inputs in the Digitac so that I can sample things directly into it from the modular. So that gives me the option to record into Ableton or sample into the Digitac without having to change anything. I just do one quick setting within Ableton and then it would reroute it. And I can actually do both at the same time if I want to. So yes, that's how that works. Let's see here. Didn't Bones make a career on that? Yep, absolutely. Let's see. Like all the jazz people are so influenced by the classic bebop and blue note stuff, and everyone sounds the same. Yeah, and that's normal. Like if you've ever read, have that book here somewhere. I've this book that I read. It's, if you ever get a chance to read it, it's like a 1 hour read, or maybe not even that much. It's a really short little book, but it's called Steal Like an Artist. And the whole idea of the book is that no art in any form is totally original. Every artist is influenced by everything they've ever seen, every piece of art they've ever seen. And artists steal like an artist. They say, oh, I like that. I'm inspired by that. I'm inspired by that. I'm inspired by that. And I'm going to put those together and make my own thing, right? And the whole idea of stealing like an artist, I think that's, in music, it's sampling, it's doing all that stuff, because it's, it's not just about creating something original. Where it gets me, and where I see that different from what we were talking about before, as far as like the, what happens when people kind of copy other people, is use those influences to create your own new original thing, rather than saying this one sound or popular thing influenced me to the point where I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to try to do the exact same sound. And that's where I think it's like a cop-out. Like, well, somebody else came up with something cool, and you're just going to piggyback off that and just do the same thing and hope that it gets you popular as well. So I like the idea of taking a bunch of different ideas and using those to create your own original idea, rather than just taking one idea and trying to duplicate it and copy it. Let's see here. You're saying the internet homogenizes the music. Yeah, I mean, I think it does with a lot of things. It homogenizes music and art and television and ideas and, anything. Like, because especially the way algorithms work, and they feed you the things that you're interested in, you're going to see a whole lot of the same thing, and then you're going to think that's the only thing, and you're not getting inspiration from a bunch of different stuff. Whether that's in art or music or politics or education or religion or whatever it is. If you're only getting one set of information, you're not getting diverse inspirations that will cause you to put those together to create something new and original. You're going to end up just regurgitating the same thing that you got, because you'll think that's the only thing there is. So I think influences and inspirations are really, really important. That's why it's important to listen to a lot of different kinds of music. No matter what kind of music you make, listen to a lot of different stuff. And it will definitely help you. The breathalyzer 59, is that your age? I think where people started putting their ages in here, because we're talking about all the older music that we liked and all the history that we liked. I hate that people are with categories. Fusion guys do this too. Yeah, what is or isn't fusion? Yeah, the whole thing about gatekeeping music, I think, is dumb. Like, just do your thing. But again, these two things go hand in hand. If you are trying to copy someone, trying to duplicate what they're doing, the easiest way for you to explain that is to say, I'm X genre, right? But then you've got somebody like Stimming, who we were talking about before, who he couldn't care less about genre. He's just like, I'm just going to make music that I like, and it's fun, and it makes people want to dance, and call it what you want. Is it house? Is it techno? Is it deep? Is it melodic? Is it what? Yes, it's all those things, and it should be, right? So come up with your own sound. What is your sound? Not what sound are you trying to copy, or who are you trying to be? Somebody told me all the time, be yourself, because everyone else is already taken. It's the same with music. Be yourself. Don't just try to take somebody else's thing, because then you're trying to be someone else. So anyway, let's see. Thanks for the detailed answer. I've been resetting up my studio all day. I'm glad. I just reset up. This was when I got back from Superbooth in Berlin a few weeks ago. I was just building this case at that point, and I said I wanted to build everything around this. So I redid everything too, so I empathize with what you're going through right now. Redoing your studio is fun, but it is also a giant pain in the butt. So I totally get that. And I'm constantly redoing things as well. So let's see. You have a push 2. Do you think the MP is worth the upgrade? I'm really on the fence. I did try Osmos in Montreal. I was blown away by. Again, and I'll put this the same way I was putting all of the other things. MPE is worth the upgrade if you are going to do stuff that uses MPE. I don't find myself using MPE hardly at all, although it's really cool, and I will at some point. I'll play around with it as a creative tool, but I haven't been very much. But that's not why I got it. I got it because I want to use it standalone at some point. I like playing around with different configurations of live performance gear, and I think that now that it's getting more stable, there's more and more ways that you can use the push 3 live and use it to either control other stuff or create a more polished set or use it as your audio interface or all that stuff. So I got it for the standalone capabilities and not so much the MPE, although the MPE is really cool. It's fun. And you can use the MPE in really creative ways. So like the MPE isn't just kind of like sliding in notes. The way each pad is set up is you've got, I may be wrong here, so correct me in comments if I'm wrong, but I think you have 127 positions in the X and Y and Z axis on each pad, as well as having the ability to move between those things. So what's really cool is you can set up, for example, on one pad in a drum rack, you could set up like multiple hi-hats, all different, all on the same pad. And if you were finger drumming those in or pressing on it with the beat repeat, wherever you would hit that pad differently with your finger, you would trigger a different sample. So you can add some really cool randomness in your and kind of humanization in your drums and your patterns doing it that way, which I think is a really cool way to use the MPE that's different from the kind of traditional like make a chord and slide a note of the chord to something else, which you can also do, but I like it very much like this. I do have to say where I have had a lot of fun playing with the MPE is using classical instrument sounds. So like violins and cellos and things like that sound amazing with the MPE because they sound like the real instrument. You know, the way that you would slide on a fretless neck, like on a violin or on a cello, you can make it really sound like that using the MPE, which if you're using those types of sounds in your music, the MPE is totally worth it because you can make that sound like the real thing. And it sounds beautiful and amazing. Yeah, let's see here. You think I need a drink? Yeah, 2 hours. I can talk. Ask my kids. They'll tell you, yeah, you talk and talk for a snack. I have my coffee here. I just haven't been drinking it. Keep drinking my coffee. So let's see, just joining, any opinions on Torso for adding controlled randomness? Yeah, Torso is amazing. It is, when I got the Oxy One, I was actually going back and forth between the Oxy One and the Torso. And the thing that put me over the edge is the Oxy One just has a lot more tracks and a lot more output ability to go to a lot more different things at the same time that the Torso doesn't have. But they both have the ability to do a lot of really cool random things. So the Torso has a great Euclidean sequencer, and it's also got the ability to randomize off of patterns that you already set up, which is really cool and really unique. So yeah, I mean, I would say the three kind of big guns in this controlled randomness sequencer world are the Oxy One, the Torso T1, and the Hapax. Those three all do a lot of really cool controlled randomness stuff. So if you have or are thinking about getting any of those, you're going to be fine no matter which one you get. Each one is a bit different. Again, going back to what we were talking about before, workflow wise, all the workflow is a bit different. And so find the workflow that you gel with best, and get that one. So if you have the opportunity to borrow from a friend and actually use them for a little bit, you'll get a better sense of which workflow you really gel with, and then stick with that one. But yeah, they're all really good. I couldn't say anything bad about any of the three of those. I just think that I selected this one really because of workflow, because of portability, and it had certain features in it that really work with my style of playing live and my style of writing. So yeah, it's but yeah, they're all great. The torso's awesome. I would actually love to get a torso, at least like to play around with, because I've used it a bit, but not enough. I think that, again, we were talking about workflow inspires different things. I think I would write different things just because the workflow is different. So I'd love to play around with one. So torso, if you're listening, send me a torso to play around with. That would be tons of fun. I actually want to get the S4. That looks amazing. Speaking of torso gear. When you do your thing, someone says, that sounds like so-and-so. Yeah, I mean, but see, I appreciate that, because that for me, that's the inspiration. You know, inspired by something, yeah, it's going to have things that sound kind of like that. But when you're like blatantly ripping off whole tracks in a style that everybody else is blatantly ripping off whole tracks, that's where it's like, okay, there's about enough of that. You know, come up with a creative way to do it on your own. But yeah, sounds like I get, and again, maybe that's me coming from the DJ world. There's a certain amount when I'm writing music, or even when I'm performing live, there's a certain part of that where you want to fit in with the night that you're playing. And this is something we'll talk about in the course, by the way, Wabbit. But the idea of the difference between like a live show and a DJ night. And a big part of that is fitting in with the night. And when you're producing, a lot of that is fitting in with the style of music that DJs are playing right now, so that when they hear your track, they imagine it going with their set, with their other things that they're playing. So there is a sense of wanting to sound like things or fitting in with things. And I just think it gets taken a little too far when it becomes just like blatantly doing exactly the same sound format, you know, the same length track with the breakdown the same length, using the vocal the same way, doing that stuff. So, and even a lot of the vocals that they're taking now, they're taking from like the exact same era of the 90s. So it's like, it's just funny how they're all trying to do the same thing. But yes, definitely. You have to reach outside the box and then go see the world. Yes, absolutely. Get inspiration from everywhere, you know, everywhere. It is a great saying. I love that. Be yourself because everyone else is already taken. Let's see, YouTube tutorials are a gift and a curse. Creatives see education, others see instructions to copy. I get that. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm actually very sensitive to that when I put out videos on YouTube. And I was very sensitive to that when I was writing my course that's just about to get started, because I didn't want it to be, here's exactly what you should do. Do it this way. I wanted it to be, here are some frameworks, some ideas to inspire creativity. Here are some methods that can help you find your own creativity, rather than saying, put a kick drum every 4 beats, put this here, put this here, put this here, and you have techno. Like that, I couldn't and wouldn't do that way. I think it's very much about your own expression. Music should be you expressing yourself, whatever style it is, whether it's techno, whether it's house, whether it's hip hop, whether it's pop music, whether it's jazz, whether it's blues rock, it doesn't matter. Express yourself in a way that makes you feel good expressing yourself. And my course, as well as the videos that I try to put out on YouTube, are all about helping people find ways to express themselves, not me saying, do it the way I do it or you're wrong, which unfortunately I think there are people that do that out there. I definitely try to avoid that. Let's see, I learned a lot. Also, there's so much trash info out there as well. Yes, I agree 100%. There is a lot of bad info out there as well. But again, I think for me, bad info is relative. Bad info is when people say, this is how you have to do it or you're wrong. And because I think that's not the right way to look at it. You know, they may not be doing something technically correct, but the way I look at it is music is art, art is expression. There's no thing that says it has to be a certain way. So maybe you like using a piece of gear in the totally wrong way, but it makes a sound that you like it to make. Like you can bang on the body of an acoustic guitar and have it be a drum. that doesn't mean you're using the guitar wrong, right? So yes, there is bad information out there, but it's, in my opinion, it's only bad if they're saying this is the only way to do it. I think that exploration is good, and find cool, good, new, interesting ways to do things. Let's see, what else? Interested in the push 3 stability. I've heard recently this month of stability issues in some forums. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I haven't used it live yet, is just because of that. I've run into personal stuff here using it where I'll be doing something and Ableton will crash or the push 3 will disconnect, and I don't know if that's Ableton, if it's my computer, if it's the push 3. I don't know what's causing it, but it happens enough that I haven't used it live yet. Before I would ever use it live, I would have to spend a lot of time with it, playing it in a live kind of the way I would play it live, and have absolutely no problems, and then I would consider using it live. But yeah, I would already be iffy using a laptop live, so using a push 3, I think there's an equal amount of stability. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's there yet. I think it's getting there, and I think when it is there, when it is stable, it is going to be an absolutely phenomenal tool for playing live. But I don't think it's there yet. I wouldn't feel comfortable with playing with it live yet, but I think it's getting there. Let's see, what else? Does the bottom of the push 3 get sticky? I mean, hasn't yet, but it actually feels really different. So that kind of rubbery coating that was on the top, it doesn't feel the same on the top of the push 3 as it did on the push 2. And then on the bottom, it actually feels very much like hard plastic and not like that kind of rubbery coating on the bottom. So I don't imagine it will, because I think that rubbery coating was what got sticky as it broke down. So I don't think it will, but I don't know. I haven't had it happen yet, for sure. Let's see, or sides and or yeah, I don't think it will. I actually don't think the top will either, because the top feels different enough that I don't think it's that same kind of rubbery texture that was on the older ones, but I could be wrong. Let's see, Torso has 16 tracks, could definitely use more. Yeah, I think that's the problem. That was one of the reasons why I went with the Oxy, is because, as we talked about before, I think you said you joined in late on the stream, but the Oxy has 4 sequencers, and each one of those can be any one of the 8 different types of sequencers that the Oxy has, one of which is an 8-track multi-track sequencer. So you can have 4 8-track sequencers or 32 tracks. So it's already double what the Torso has. And then as far as outputs go, the Torso can output 16 channels of MIDI, and I think 8 CV and 8 gate, or it may even be 4 CV and 4 gate. I don't remember. I think it's 8 and 8. The Oxy has 8 CV and 8 gate out, but it also has 3 different MIDI paths. So it can go 1 through 16A, 1 through 16B, 1 through 16C. So it has 48 channels of outgoing MIDI plus 8 CV and 8 gate. So there's a lot of flexibility in that, and that was probably one of the biggest things that made me choose this over the T1. This and the workflow. I like having a screen, even though it's a small one, just to help me not have to remember while I'm playing live, button combinations and things like that. And the Torso has that. It has you need to kind of do button combos to be able to do different functionality. And I like to be able to see, especially in a dark room, to have a little bit of a screen that I can see, but I don't like big giant screens. So it's like, I'm picky about that. I like it small, but kind of clear and concise and to the point. If somebody tells me I sound like so-and-so, then I'm honored. Yeah, exactly. That's the cool thing. When they say you sound like someone and it's one of your favorite artists, you're like, oh, well, that's cool. That's good. As long as they're not saying, oh, that track you did is identical to this track by this other artist. I think that's where it goes a little too far. It goes from being an inspiration to a replication. to a copy of something, which I think is not, I don't know, for me, that's not, that kind of goes, this is a much deeper conversation that we can have, but it goes to the idea that I think in this day and age, people feel like everything needs to be a side hustle and everything needs to be monetized and it needs to be a commodity. And when you start looking at music like that, then they say, okay, what's the most profitable product I can make? That means it's the cheapest to make, it's the easiest to make, I can put it out as much as possible, and then I can make a whole bunch of money off of it because it's really popular. That's great if the monetization part of it is important and the business part of it is important, but yeah, if it's art for art, then if it's really great and if it inspires people, then people will buy it or listen to it or book you to play shows or whatever. And that's a different way to do it, rather than flipping the method and saying, what's the thing that will sell? That's what I'm going to make, rather than saying, here's what I'm going to make and having it sell. There's nothing wrong with selling your stuff. There's nothing wrong with booking gigs and getting paid for them or selling your tracks or any of that stuff. There's nothing wrong with any of that, but it's hard when it's the point. I have friends that write music for TV commercials and, jingles for things and video game music and stuff. And for them, it feels a lot more like work than it does like artistic, creative inspiration, because they get told it needs to be this long. Here's the vibe I want. Here's the sound. It needs to do this. It needs to speed up. It needs to slow down. It needs to whatever. So then they're making a product. At least that's what they tell me. That's kind of their feeling, is that it feels like they're making a product rather than feeling like they're being artistic and inspired. And so then when they go to write music on their own, they're like, wow, it's so freeing, so liberating, because I can just make music and be inspired by it. So yeah, you sound like Bones. Just not getting along with the torso workflow. It's probably on its way out for me. And again, I will say, as I've said about other stuff on this stream and a lot before, that doesn't mean it's bad. And because I like the Oxy doesn't mean it's good. It means this is good for me and other things may not be good for me. That, it sounds like, Todd, the torso is not good for you, or the workflow's not agreeing with you. Maybe the Oxy will, maybe a Circlon would, maybe a Hapex would, maybe what's the little Korg one? I can't remember. But there's no telling that it's because something doesn't work for you that it's good or bad. It's just good or bad for you. It's just a workflow that you may or may not agree with. And I'm very much that way. I have sold way more gear than I own by tenfold, because I'm big about, I'll buy something, I'll put it into my workflow, I'll give it every opportunity to do what it does and for me to be happy with it and use it and inspired by it. And if it doesn't happen, I don't keep it around. It just gets sold, because I'm not, this is going to sound dumb for somebody who has a screen full of gear right now, but I'm not a gear collector. Like, every piece of gear that I have because I use it, and because it's like a working collection of things where, I've had things that were amazing and that were collectible and that were whatever, but that I sold because I wasn't using them and I would rather somebody else got the use out of them. And that, I have gear I'm selling right now for the same thing. I have a Dirty Wave M8, for example. I don't particularly gel with the tracker workflow. I wanted to try it. I wanted to use it. I wanted to see if I could. If I don't sell it, I will still go back to it at some point and figure out how it works and see if I can make it gel. But I didn't gel with it. And other people, it's their absolute favorite piece of gear in the world. And so I'm of the mind that if I'm not using it because I don't get along with it, I want to get it in the hands of somebody who will get along with it, who's going to have a great time and make some super fun, amazing music with it. I think that all of this gear is designed to be used and it's designed to be inspirational. So if it doesn't inspire me, I get rid of it, and hopefully it inspires the next person. Not because it was bad, but because it just didn't get along with me. What else? Any other questions? I did want to talk just really quick about the course that I'm getting started, just so I can answer any questions about that if anybody has any questions out there. So the course is going to be a combination. Well, first of all, it starts July 11th. It's up for pre-sale right now on my website, circlelive.com/courses. We'll take you to it. There's a link also in the description of this video, so you can get there directly. And basically the course is going to be a combination of a few different things, because I wanted to make sure it was something that was really useful to people and that they could actually learn from, rather than just like another, set of videos that people watch. So there is a self-paced video portion of the course. I'm going to switch views here so we can actually talk. There is a self-paced video portion of the course. There's 8 sections to that, broken up into, I think, 50 plus different individual steps or individual segments within that. That talks everything about taking your gear from, hey, I have gear, I know how to use it, all the way through to I can confidently perform live in front of people if that's what I choose to do. Some people don't want to do that, which is cool. There's still a lot in the course for you. Just the final steps about how to do live performance, how to, set up and sound check and, what to pack and all that kind of stuff that's at the end won't be so much for you today, but you get lifetime access to the course. So maybe at some point you do want to do that, you can always come back to that part. So that's the kind of self-paced portion. The other part is the 1 month long portion of the course starting July 11th. It goes for 4 weeks. During those 4 weeks, 2 times every week, there's a 1 hour Zoom live Q&A session that is themed on one of the 8 sections of the course. So everybody who's on the Zoom will have, or at least should have, seen that portion of the course, and we'll be asking and answering questions that are more in depth about that particular topic. So it's something, it won't just be like a random chat that will waste everybody's time. It'll be something that, if we're, let's say it's the kick and bass section and we're talking about that. Okay, today's Q&A, and you could have watched the Q&A, you could have watched the kick and bass thing the first day you got the course a month ago, or whatever, 3 weeks ago. And now we're finally at that section. So then you tune into that Q&A because you've got particular questions about the kick and bass section, or you want to see something kind of explored deeper. You have, you want to see an example of something. You want to talk more about, your particular style of music or genre of music and how what was taught in that part of the lesson would better apply to you. Or if there's something that I did that wasn't clear, I want to be able to clarify things, because I really want you to learn from this. Like, that's the whole point of this, is that you actually feel at the end of this like, wow, I got so much out of that. So there will be 8 of those 1 hour sessions. So you get 8 hours of group coaching sessions, which are themed so that they're not a waste of time for everybody. Then you also, at the same time in the course, during the month, every week for the month, you can send me up to a 10-minute recording of you playing live, and I will give you feedback via email. So I'll listen to those recordings and I'll say, like, in this section, work a little bit on the mix here, or this instrument disappeared, or you might want to choose a different sound here to have it come out a little bit better, or this part got busy, or this might be good to have a different type of bass line here, and just give some feedback just as a listener of the music. And hopefully over the course of the 4 weeks, by sending me your recordings each week and then working on this stuff, you'll be able to listen to the final week and the beginning week and hear that kind of progress that you've made over the course of the time, whether it was through learning via watching the video courses, whether it was through the Q&A, or whether it was through the individual feedback on your live performance. Also included in this is a 1 hour one-on-one Zoom call lesson with me on the topic of your choice at any time during that month. So when things get up and running, you'll be able to schedule your one-on-one, and we can do it anytime you want. Just shoot me a message. There's actually a questionnaire in the scheduling part of it that says, what would you like to talk about? What do you want to go over? What do we want to discuss and cover? And so you send me that information and I'll get everything ready so that we can have a really productive one-on-one with you. And you also get 20% off any other one-on-ones that you book if you're in the course, which is another, I think, big advantage, depending if you're already thinking about taking some lessons. It's a great way to do that and to get some of the money back from taking the course in the form of discounts off of things that you would have already done anyway. So that's pretty good. The other thing is there is, and this is something that you get access to right when you sign up, but you have ongoing access even after the month. It's kind of lifetime access, just like the course. And that is to a peer community. There's a group online. It's kind of like a Facebook group or a Discord or whatever, but it's through the hosting platform that I have hosting the course. So it's a private peer group. And what I think will be really interesting about the private peer group is that everybody in it will have taken the course. So everybody will have a certain level of base knowledge over stuff. You can work through things together. You can get together and chat about stuff. You can network. You might find people in the course that are in your area, and you guys can work together to create a live event where you guys can play out if you want. You guys can bounce music off of each other. You can collaborate on productions or on performances. You can do all kinds of stuff, because it's not just going to be an open group where any like random synth gearhead is just going to go in there and shit all over whatever gear you're using. It's not about that. This is about people who are serious about improving their skills in performing music, whether it's to perform for themselves or to perform live in front of a crowd. And so you're going to have a whole bunch of people that are kind of on the same journey that you are to learn this kind of hardware live performance electronic music. So you have a lot of people that you can relate to and chat with and network with. Another thing that's cool about it too is that you can talk to each other about gear. Like, I tried this, what did you think? Kind of like what we've been talking about today. Like, have you tried the Torso? Have you tried the Oxy? Have you tried the Circlon? Have you tried the whatever? And get feedback from each other. So it's not just coming from me. It's not just coming from somebody who's being paid to push a product on YouTube or something like that. So it will be, I think, a way to bring people together who are really interested in very specifically the same kind of stuff. Not just I'm into synths, but I'm interested in performing electronic music using hardware. And you're all kind of in that same path together. And because of that, I think it'll be a great peer group that will be really useful and interesting for everybody. So if you're interested in the course, click the link down in the description and check it out. There's a whole outline of the course that goes through all 50 sections, so you can see exactly what's going to be in the course before you do it. And some of those sections are going to have a video that's 2 minutes long, and some of them have videos that are 20 or 30 minutes long. It kind of depends on the individual topic, but I did want to break it up into all those topics, because once you go through the course and you decide you want to go back and rewatch a section, I wanted it to be really clear about what you were going to watch and say, like, I want to go see the thing specifically about, this thing. Okay, so then you can go back to that specific video. So again, the whole point of this was to try to do something that would be effective for people to actually learn and make improvements, but it would also be functional from my side, where it's not just one-on-one lessons, which it's really hard to do a lot of those, and because I have another job and all of that stuff. So I wanted it to be able to be a combination of, here's the foundational knowledge that everybody needs that you can get in the course and you can come back to it, and the peer group that everybody needs, and you've got ongoing access to that with each other. But then also, here's this combination of one-on-one time, individualized feedback, and the group Q&A stuff, but also keeping the group Q&A targeted as well, so that it kind of keeps everything focused on exactly what you want to do. So I think it will be a good learning system, and I'm very excited to get this started. It's about half sold out right now, after just 3 days, 2.5 days. So if you're interested, definitely jump on it right away, because it will fill up. I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to do the next one. I have an idea for another course that I may do in the interim, instead of doing these back to back. And I also may open up pre-bookings for the next one once this one sells out, but it will be a little ways down the road, and I would anticipate that would sell out well in advance of the event as well. So, or the month of the cohort. So if you want to do it, definitely jump on it, because it will be, I think it will be a lot of fun. I think it would be great. A fair amount of people who were in this chat today have already signed up for the course. So it was nice to see some of the faces and names in there, although I think some of the names are different. I'm having to guess who's who, but I know a few of the people in the stream today are already going to be in the course. So that said, does anybody have any questions about the course? Definitely pop those in the chat as well, because I would love to answer any questions you have, or concerns, or if you're on the fence and you're not sure, what can I help you out with to let you know, is it a good fit for you or is it not a good fit for you? I'm like, I don't want you to pay for this course and take it if it's not something that you're gonna, that's going to be good for you. So I'll definitely let you know if it's not a good fit, if I don't think it's a good thing for what you're trying to learn. But I do think that it is a fit for a lot of different people. And again, that was how I designed the course, was so that it would be like that. So it's not gear specific, it's not genre specific, it's not only for people who want to perform live in front of, on a main stage in front of wherever, but it is for people that want to do that too. There's going to be things that you can kind of pick and choose, the things that are valuable to you. And I think there's plenty of information in here that will allow you to pick and choose and still get a lot out of this. So I think it will help everybody take a big step in whatever direction you're headed, as long as it's making music by playing hardware to make electronic music. That's the one kind of cutoff. If you're interested in playing guitar, this probably isn't the course for you. If you're interested in producing and writing songs and recording and doing that stuff, this probably isn't the course for you. Although it will have things that apply, it's not, specifically applicable. And, if you're looking for ways to better use Ableton and your DAW, this is not the course for you. If you're looking for, how to be a better piano player, this is probably not the course for you. So there's a lot of people who this is not for, but I think that there's also a large number of people that this is for as well. So if you have questions, pop those into the chat. Happy to answer those. I'm going to refresh this because I've had problems in the past with the chat. People saying that they put something in, but I didn't see it because my stupid slow computer was not refreshing fast enough. So, yeah. Let's see here. Anyway, while you guys think of any questions and pop them in there, just really quick as well, a couple of other things I have coming up. I'm going to be playing a show in Portland on August 1st. I think I have something September in Chicago, but that's not finalized yet. Potentially in August, thing in Chicago too. October, I will be going to ADE in Amsterdam, the Amsterdam Dance Event, playing at least one, but I think probably 2 or 3 shows there. And I will be in Europe for either the week before or the week after. I haven't finalized that yet. So I have some open dates for bookings. So if you're in Europe and you have promoters that are interested in booking me while I'm over there, that is the second. So ADE is the 3rd week of October. So I will either be there the 2nd and 3rd week or the 3rd and 4th week. So the 3rd week for sure, and either the week before or the week after. If it's the week before, it's because I'm also going to go to another hardware synth event in England, in Bristol, and would love to play around that as well. So if you know anybody that is interested in booking, pass that on. If you have anybody who's throwing events in any of those places, definitely pass that on. And if it's not around one of those, if you're here in the States and if you've got promoters in your area that are interested in doing techno nights, definitely let me know, because I would be interested, and let them know so that they can reach out and contact me. So let's see. Well, it looks like there's not a lot going on in the conversation right now, so I think we'll call it a day for now. I appreciate everybody spending the time. It's so nice to see everybody stick around for the thing. I know I talk a lot, but I think it's fun to just kind of hang out and chat on a Sunday afternoon, and chat about stuff that hopefully is valuable. Hopefully you guys get something out of this, and I always get stuff from you guys, so it's always a lot of fun to do this stuff for me as well. Definitely, it's not a chore or anything. It's something I really love to do. So thank you guys all for tuning in. It's great to have you here. Hopefully I can see you all live at one of these events soon. And if you're interested in doing the course, definitely click that link below and jump on before it sells out. And I would love to have you in the course. And in that case, I would love to see you there. So thanks guys very much.